Good evening. I want to convene the regular meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard for Tuesday, November 20th. We know the meeting has been properly warned because we were here at 5:45 to go into executive session. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of the November 6th and November 13th meeting. Would someone like to make a motion?
Oops.
David Beach.
Sorry.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of November 16th and November 13th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. I just want to note we have Shanta is missing because she is recovering from some surgery that she had to have. So hopefully she'll be back next week. We wish her well. Chair's remarks. I think, is Dick here? Oh, good. I'm assuming Dick will talk about the tree lighting, so I won't say anything about that. I'll let you do that. So I think that's the big
Dick's
thing
gonna-
happening in town
Dick's
this
going to
week.
drive the new sidewalk plow up to the
That's
top
right.
of the mountain and
Yeah.
put.
That's right. Oh, I will remind everybody of the Community Thanksgiving dinner, which is from 12 to 5 at St. Michael's School on Walnut Street, and everybody is welcome. And it's a really great community event. I think they serve, I don't know if it was last year, 700 or 800 people. So anybody who would like to come or go and have a free Thanksgiving dinner, you are welcome. Now I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Thank you. I had just one quick reminder for the community this evening, which is that the winter parking ban is in effect for the overnight parking, and that often at this time of year that gets a little stressful because we might not see snow until December or beyond. This year, actually, it goes into effect on November 15th, and we got our first snowstorm on November 15th, and of course had our second one today. So just a reminder to everybody to please not be parked on the street between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. And then also be aware, look for the purple and amber sign or lights that flash when we're doing the snow clearing from the streets and from the parking lots in town, so that people can be aware. We do want to remind folks too that if you are out there, the police department will try to find you. We try to be sort of kind and gentle in the enforcement of this, but we need as many people as possible to comply in the first instance in order for that task to be doable for the few people who might find themselves stuck on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the select board that has any comments or committee reports that they'd like to make?
I have one small thing. I was lucky enough to be able to attend the 2018 Vermont Statewide Housing Conference. And I know that there's an agenda item coming up tonight, so I won't really talk about it much, but maybe during that item. Went down with our Sue Fillion, our planning director, and planning commission chair, Liz McLaughlin, and it was a great, very eye-opening experience. So we'll talk more about housing later in the meeting.
Great, thanks. Anyone else?
Excuse me, if you can all speak a little louder, it's hard.
Oh, we're sorry. Oh, we're sorry.
Thank you.
Anyone else have anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. Now it's time in the meeting for public participation, and this is the time when we'll take public comment on things that are not on tonight's agenda. So I don't know if anyone has any comments they'd like to make. Please come up, and if you could tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is it Mike Ward?
It's for the TV, so you won't hear yourself amplified, but if you step up to it so the TV land can hear you.
Okay. So my name is Christopher Tanner. I live at 197 Elliott Street, which is right across from the park on Elliott Street. I've lived there for almost 7 years, I want to say, and in September of this year, I had a meeting with Peter Elwell and the chief of police over here about drug activity in my house. And I want to just once again thank Peter and the chief of police for taking me seriously, for listening to me. After I spoke with them, I definitely saw activity slow down with the drug dealing downstairs, and probation was notified, and people involved were notified to try to put a stop to this activity. I'm here because my car was stolen from my driveway on August 15th by the sister of these drug addicts downstairs who were put in to my building by Groundworks Collaborative. And Groundworks Collaborative and my landlord, who works for Groundworks Collaborative, have done everything they can to stonewall me and shut me up about what's been going on at my house. And when I spoke with Peter and the chief of police, they took me seriously, and they knew that what I was saying was true. And I was told that the information that I was giving them, license plate numbers, descriptions, the activity, was tying my downstairs neighbor in with fentanyl overdoses in town. There has been a man coming to my house for over a year who was friends with these people downstairs. He's been on my property every day for a year and a half since they've been there, and I've been telling the police about it. I've been telling my landlord about it. I said, I know they're dealing drugs down there because once this man comes, it's a flurry of activity down there. Mostly with the drug addicts from the wall. We all know the wall that's been closed down, but before the wall was closed down, it was those people coming up into my house, using my house as a drug den. Well, to make a long story short, that man who was coming to my house for a year and a half was just busted on October 2nd with 356 bags of heroin. Nobody told me. I found out through the street. And once I found out, and he's still coming to my house in a different car now, because they confiscated his car when he got busted. He's still coming to my house in a different car, taking the woman, who I believe is on probation, out on Saturday mornings. And there's no one to the police, I've been working with the police, and my landlord's been stonewalling me. And there was an elderly couple who lived underneath me, not underneath me, because the drug dealers live underneath me. This couple lived next to these drug dealers. I said to my landlord, I said, Mark, these scumbags have driven out Barb and Jerry. And he goes, oh, no, they haven't. Well, here's my neighbor right here. Here's my elderly neighbor right here. They threw 4 smashed windows in 1 year downstairs. 4 smashed windows, one of which was a brick that was thrown. I have police reports on all of this. This is in here. I have police reports all documented. It's been a nightmare. My peace and quiet and the sanctity of my home has been taken away from me. And like I told my landlord, this might be your house, but this is my home. And my neighbors aren't here right now. They're supposed to be here. Dr. Vancouvering and her husband want to make a statement because we've all witnessed that man who was here, who got busted with the heroin, was at the house. Well, just to wrap this up, today, a few hours ago, I called my landlord and I said, well, Mark, their buddy, Corey Jackson, was busted with 356 bags of heroin. He's at the house right now. That was the impetus, I believe, that got my landlord to do something. They were served eviction papers today. Can you imagine the hate that these people have for me? Because I'm the one who's been blowing the whistle on them. And I'm living on disability and a fixed income. I'm living in poverty. And when my truck was stolen, it was $330 to get it back. And the only reason my truck was recovered was because a friend of mine saw it going down Route 9 towards Keene 4 days after it was stolen. He followed it with a cell phone, and that's how we were able to get her sister and another career criminal named Timmy Wainwright. Nobody called to help me. Nobody from Groundworks would do anything nobody called me. I was walking around in 90-degree weather in August, trying to do my laundry, trying to go grocery shopping, trying to get to the doctors, I volunteer. Everything came to a crashing end because my vehicle is 21 years old. It's the last vehicle that I had. And even now, has Groundworks called me once? 2 days after my vehicle was stolen, my landlord called me and said, did you find your vehicle? No, Mark, I haven't found my vehicle. And it was through a miracle that I got my vehicle back. I want some answers from the Groundworks people. I want a meeting with Josh Davis. They have spent thousands of dollars on these junkies downstairs, paying for their rent, paying for their food stamps, giving them excuses and chances. But what about normal people like me or my neighbor here, Jerry, who was driven out with his wife? And Dr. Vancouvering's not here right now, but I'm not making this up. And even now, I don't know what's going on because no one's telling me anything. I'm still reporting the illegal activity that's going on to the police department, and they have said to me, we appreciate what you're doing. I've talked to other people, and people are teaching me you have to come together as neighbors to root this out, to root this kind of scum out. But what I've gone through in the past 2 years with these people downstairs, I am done. And when my truck was stolen, I said, no one's going to keep my mouth shut about this. This is Groundworks Collaborative, and I want my select board to give me some answers. Why didn't anybody call me after my truck was stolen? Who's helping me with the $330 that I had to shell out to get my truck back? $180 for the impound, $150 for damages, and my truck was full of syringes and beer bottles. I have never been treated so disrespectfully by my landlord, Mark Rethy, and the Groundworks people. Treated like I was some kind of a child. I'm a grown man, and I have police reports here, and I have neighbors and things who are willing to back me up. So even though now they're being evicted, that can still take 30, 60, 90, 120 days. These people hate me. The other day I walked by their door in the hallway and something hit that door so hard, they are making a statement to me. The statement is, we hate you. And I still have to, here's Dr. Vancouvering right here, my neighbor, would like to make a statement. My neighbor, Dr. Vancouvering, would like to make a statement. She's witnessed this too. When my truck was stolen, not one person offered to help me. The only people who were there to help me were the AIDS Project of Brattleboro, Vermont. Helped me with rides and stuff. And when I got my vehicle back, my mechanic couldn't fix it for over a week, so 11 days I'm without a vehicle. And these people downstairs, they're still dealing. And I told everybody, it's not so much her, it's her Dominican baby daddy who's down there. And they've lost their children. And I'm going to wrap this up. Yeah. The drug dealer, Corey Jackson, who was bringing them the heroin, when I Googled him, he was arrested a few years ago for cruelty to children. These are the kind of people that Groundworks put into my home. I want some answers. I want some answers. I'll be coming back to future meetings. Maybe my neighbors would like to make a statement now about what they've witnessed in the past 2 years. They haven't come forward here and maybe she's, I don't want to overwhelm her, but now you know, Kate, what's going on. 197 Elliott Street, right across from the park. And please feel free to stop by anybody who sees one. Look at the broken windows in the front of my house, the smashed windows. 4 smashed windows and a stolen vehicle. I was told this wasn't enough to evict them. And so once I got the final piece of their good buddy who's always there being a heroin dealer, let's see what happens now. And I wanted to say, if anything happens to me and then I get killed or something, I want my family in Connecticut to know I never stopped loving them. This is what Brattleboro, and I love this community. And I'm here to, I love Brattleboro. I came here 20 years ago, but I've never seen anything like this. Josh Davis, I have some questions, so I'm asking, and Amanda Sabo from Groundworks. That's the name that I got. I want these people here in a public forum with my landlord to explain to me and my neighbors why 4 smashed windows, a stolen car, that's not enough to get rid of these people, and I'm the one who's being talked to disdainfully by these people. Oh, I feel enlightened now. Thank you all for listening.
Thank
to a true story about 197 Elliott Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Vancouver,
Yeah,
a statement, please?
Yeah. Yeah. If you can tell us who you are.
Hi, my name's Ann Vancouvering, and I live at 195 Elliott. And actually, the way my house is situated, I don't see a lot because I'm next door and back a little. But certainly the amount of traffic has been extraordinary. All our cars were rifled one night.
Extraordinary. Not
Yeah.
exaggeration.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's like hard to get into our back parking lot a lot. A lot of activity. People have moved out because they don't feel safe. elderly people who live next door for many years left.
Right here,
Oh,
Dan.
we have to.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Hi. So,
We have to have
I
one
mean,
person talk at a time.
yeah. So anyway, I've just been concerned, and while I really want people to have a second chance, I feel that having a second chance at the expense of everybody else's safety is not what we actually want, and I have felt unsafe. And I have felt unsafe leaving things out. So I haven't lived in as close a proximity as Chris, and you know, his statements sound a little hyperbolic, but they actually are fairly accurate.
Okay, thank you.
You wanna say
Thank
something,
you.
Jerry? Yeah.
Yes.
You people don't know me from Adam. But you know my decorations for Christmas. We're the place on 197 Elliott that used to decorate like no tomorrow for the kids. I didn't do it for me. I did it for the kids. In October, they would ask me, when are you going to put up your decorations? And once I started, they would come by every day and say, when they're going to be done. We never tried to get any money off this. It was for the kids in our community. To me more innocent than ever.
It's okay, Jim, but just tell them what happened with the, why you left. Tell them why you
The
left.
reason we left, and we would be there longer than anyone. We were there for 13 years.
13 years.
I loved it there. I loved it for the kids. I loved to watch out the window and see the kids in the park. But then when the people started moving in, my home became destroyed. Phone call, doors knocking from 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to get in, saying, I want my drugs. And my wife would be scared and say to me, what are we going to do? And I would say, you got the wrong apartment, it's next door. And they would leave, but they always would come back. Weekends was no sleep because the traffic was, unless you've been through it, you have no idea what it's like. Then the smashed windows. A cognac bottle coming through the window at 3 o'clock in the morning in our bedroom. That was the last straw. My wife's safety and my grandson and my granddaughter who was living with us, we had to leave. We didn't want to leave. We were forced to leave.
And I was told that he didn't leave because,
Yeah.
right,
Wait.
now you
Yeah.
know, Mark.
Hey,
Now you know Groundworks
Hey,
people.
Chris, we have to have one person at a time.
You know,
Done. I'm done with this.
I'm,
Yeah.
I was a kid when this fire department was built. It was the biggest thing that happened in the area, and everybody from all over came to see the new fire department. I like to see those days back. We didn't have the drug problems. We didn't have the kids being molested. You were safe. You could leave your doors wide open. My mother, God bless her, was an avid Patriot fan, like you wouldn't believe. She put on her front door, if you come to visit me while the Patriots are playing, watch the game is fine. But if you come to just socialize, come back after the game. But that door was always left open. Her back door, her front door. Those days are long gone. God, I miss them. I miss those kids coming around to our place and just standing there looking at the decorations. Because I'm just a big kid too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barry Walls. I am the husband to Ann. So I live at 195. We've been there about 2 years, and I'm a cabinet maker, but I'm renovating the house, so I'm at the house all day. I've seen lots of activity, people in the driveway, blocking, they're there for 5 minutes. I see an exchange. I don't know what it is. I can guess. And I've heard other stories around town. But I see things in the park right across the street where there'd be an exchange real quick. They sit on the park bench and they meet for 2 minutes and walk. 10 minutes later, they're back. There's exchange, whatever. And it goes on continually. So, do I know exactly what it is? No, but I can make a good assumption. So, it's scary. I'm concerned. I have a dog that likes to bark a little bit, and I'm always concerned, are they going to do something stupid to my dog or my wife? I can kind of defend myself a little bit. Although I'm fighting Lyme disease, so it's a little bit of a challenge. So it's nerve-wracking living there, a little scary. So I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories. I don't have answers for you right now.
I just wanted you to see that.
Yeah.
I don't make this up.
Yep.
Being stonewalled and being treated like an errant servant and getting this kind of an attitude from Groundworks, my landlord, no. I want answers. And we've had 3 drug dealers down there. These 3 sets of drug dealers. And my landlord said to me at one point, he goes, well, you haven't gotten along with any of them. I said, Mark, they've all been drug dealers. What do you want from me? So it's been a huge stress on me. We're going to leave so you folks can do your business. But just wanted to give you an update on what's going on across from the park on Elliott Street. And if you can get me some information from Patrick, or what's his name? You Patrick Moreland, Josh Davis, from head of Groundworks. I want some answers. I want to know from Groundworks how this could have happened. And where are they going to move these people to after they evict them? I don't want these people I don't want what was done to me being done to another citizen. I don't want, I want, this has got to be brought out we need some to know, so
Okay.
thank you again.
No, thank you for coming. Is there anyone else in the DIC?
Try to put a little air back in the room. Heartbreaking stories. And it's not just Elliott Street, but that's the reality of small town USA. I wish I had the answers of how we were going to address the situation, but you're aware of it. On a different note, I'm here to talk about 2 things, actually. I want to thank, I retired from putting up the lights. It didn't really go that well. Not like I had planned, anyway. So I actually had some help a couple of weeks ago, and I want to thank the Noontime Rotary Club that came down and helped me in Plenty Park, and Kate was there on the street. That's the good news. The bad news, I had to redo just about everything they did, but I appreciate their help.
Oh, no.
We tried really hard.
Only kidding. I only had to fix half of it. So the tree lighting, which Stephanie will talk about either after I'm done or when she's making her presentation, is Friday night. I put the tree up there today. Plenty Park is set. I wish I could do something about the weather because it's going to be probably the coldest tree lighting that I can remember in a long, long time. I know that there'll be hot chocolate there. I don't know what else is planned. But the festivities, I believe, are going to start at 5:30, and the tree lighting will be at 6. But I do want to thank all the people that came down a couple of weeks ago from the Noontime Rotary Club and Kate, and I appreciate their help. It was a lot of fun. So thank you very much, and we hope we see a lot of people there Friday night. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment during public participation? Seeing none, we're going to move on to new business, and our first item is John O'Connor is going to give us our October financial report.
Thank you, Kate, and good evening, everyone. So we're 1/3 of the way through our fiscal year, and as of the end of October, general fund expenditures were 37.5% of their budget. But as you know, we make adjustments for the semi-annual and annual expenditures, including lease and note payments, human services, and insurance. And after making those prorations, the expenses would be at 31.5%, so under the 33.3 target. Utilities fund were at 33.3%. Parking was at 27.5%. And again, the utilities fund has a one-time encumbrance for sludge removal for the year. And if we prorate that, it brings their expenditures down to 30.0%. Solid waste, revenues were 30.9% and expenditures 28.7%. The loan report, you can see we have $4,395,542 in outstanding loans issued through the town's various loan programs. 2 of the loans were overdue, and 2 loans are in default, but they are fully reserved. Program income, we have $511,513 in available funds for additional grants and loans as of the end of October. And then finally included in your packet is the grant report, which gives you information on 37 active grants and 6 grants that are in the application process. So there's a lot of information contained in all of those various reports. If you have any questions on any of it, I'll certainly try to answer those for you. If not, that's the overview through the end of October.
Great. Thanks, John. Does anyone have any questions?
Really? No one else has
I
questions?
have a small
I have
question.
a
Do you want to
small
go
question.
first? Okay. Is your small question mine?
I feel so bad. I just had a question about the police revenue, miscellaneous revenue. What is the miscellaneous revenue that's,
What page are you on?
oh, sorry, page 2 of 15
Okay.
of the general fund status report?
Those
Is it
are tips.
$10,000 tips? A $10,000 miscellaneous revenue, I'm just curious.
I don't know the answer to that, Tim.
Oh, okay.
I'm going with David then, they're tips. That's
Isn't
what
it
David
12?
said.
Is it the 12,000?
$12,090, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's,
Can't
the
even.
budget is 2,000, so I was, it's 10,000 over budget.
Yes.
We'll confirm what that is and advise the board.
Great. Maybe it's those stickers. Thank you.
My little question is probably Patrick can answer this one. Have we stopped selling the smart cards, or are we continuing to sell them?
We are strongly, excuse me, we are strongly discouraging their sale.
Okay.
We are warning anybody who comes to speak with us that these are going to cease to be useful in just a mere matter of months.
Okay.
And if somebody wants to continue to use them and maybe charge it up, we're sort of discouraging, large-scale investments in those cards. So that's something we're
Okay.
dealing with on a person-to-person basis as they come to the transportation center.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I'm ready. Tired of looking. I spent 10 minutes looking for quarters in my car the other day, and I kept just eyeballing the meter, like, why aren't you different?
Soon it will be different.
Horses, the interpreter's having a
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure. Oh,
Yeah,
that's-
sorry, the heater's great for us.
Oh,
but
that's what it is.
And I have a cold, so it's, but we'll do better.
We
Sorry.
apologize.
it's-
Well,
What
yeah.
about the heater?
Yes, yeah, do. All right, does anyone on the board have any more questions?
No.
Does anyone in the public have any questions? Dick?
Question for John, I don't know, did you receive your first check for this year for the rooms and meals, which should be coming in?
We did.
And what was it?
I don't recall the exact amount, but I do know it was the highest amount ever recorded for that first quarter. I can go look it up if you want me to.
So that, I can tell you from studying those numbers and following that, that's a significant number. So I'll talk about it later with the budget.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Franz?
Franz Reichsman from the Finance Committee. I don't know what it means for something to be in default but fully reserved. Could you just explain that a bit, please?
Yeah, it's a loan that the borrower has stopped making payments on, but we have basically offset that loan with a reserve fund. So we have a reserve, we have the loan out there as an asset, and we have the reserve as a liability. They offset each other, so it nets it out to zero. So there'll be no impact. If the loan is never paid back, there'll be no further impact to the expense budget.
Very common.
Does that make sense?
That would be great. We could then.
Better than
Would be
using
the preference.
reserves, yeah.
All right, are there any other questions on the October financial report? All right, thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
All right, thank you.
Next up is the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, who is here tonight to present their annual work plan and budget. This is Stephanie, and I don't know if anyone else. Welcome.
I am Stephanie Bonin, Executive Director of DBA.
And I'm Peter May, a new board member of the
Yeah.
DBA.
Great. That does not amplify your voices.
That's
It's
fine.
for, okay, it's for the TV.
I'm happy to report that in my opinion of being involved with the DBA for the last 5 years, that we're in the best position that we've ever been in. And the reason why I say that is because of the increased amount of community involvement that we have, the increased amount of coalitions that we're working with, the influx of new board members and the ability to recruit those new board members, and the increase in fundraising, of which we have not in my history, but in the recent history have done anything close to that. So very excited about that. I did want to introduce you to the board members that are in the room. So Sue Fillion, Greg Warden, Peter May, Steve Heim, and then also design chair, Dick DeGray, who's not on the board, but a design chair. So, I am today going to, before I present the new budget and answer any questions, just go over where we're at currently. And I do have, since I was asked to bring the FY18 budget. So in other words, we could talk about 3 different budgets if we wanted to. Let's see. So just to kind of send us off of where we are right now, since I last spoke with you, some of our accomplishments have been the bike parking parklet that is now tucked away, thanks to Patrick and Steve Barrett, tucked away for hibernation for the winter, but it will be back in the spring. So that was executed and got great media coverage on that. We were able to execute our new rack cards that are going into the Vermont Welcome Center. And so this is a series of 3 cards. So there's 3. So take 3 and pass it. They're each a different color. So those rack cards are now at 4 different Vermont Welcome Centers. So the Brattleboro presence just tripled in terms of all those visitors coming. We we definitely presented the best Brattleboro that we have. This is the 4th year that we did it, and that's the celebration of Halloween downtown. We had, in our rough estimate, 650 people downtown, and probably the 2 highlights for me of that was the 47 stops that kids could trick or treat at, and also the kids fueling station. So that kids fueling station
that was a good idea.
was done to get some protein into our kids before sugar.
Yep.
It was at Wyndham Movement Apparel, and Star from the Brooks Memorial Library had an activity as well as some scary stories. And then we partnered with the Brattleboro Parks and Rec to make sure that we were connected to the Horribles Parade and the final stop being the rec center. It was one of those moments where I woke up the next morning to emails and texts saying from many people, this is one of those times where I'm in Brattleboro saying, this is where I live. And many people commenting on how many young families were in the area, and that these are the types of activities we need to do to put young families out on the streets in a positive way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nice, Stephanie.
Put those families out on the street.
Exactly.
We knew what you meant.
We knew what you
Thank
meant.
you, front and center. We also created a quick, on-the-fly social media for the community to be rewarded for voting. And it's always amazing what programs you put out there and get a lot of coverage, and this is one of those that did. So VPR ended up coming down and doing a lot of interviews with our local merchants. And that was merchants offering incentives to people for voting. I continue to sit on 2 coalitions, the Community Response Project and also Child Care Counts Coalition, which I thoroughly enjoy and make sure that we're at the table to have deeper conversations about bettering Brattleboro. The facade improvement grant continues to be a success, and all of that money has been either promised or paid for people like the Galanis, the Vermont Stores awning that just went up. That was one of the facade improvement grants that we gave out this fiscal year. The flowers we continue to do, and then lastly, well, I guess moving into what's going on right now. So holiday lights are on all of our minds, and I think it's a great example of a place that we've been bringing in the community. So we had 13 volunteers come out for the lights, and then 3 board members. And to me, that's a huge success. We are going to be, for this lighting ceremony, we're going to be unveiling a thing that I'm really excited about. I feel like I'm about to scoop myself right now.
I know, I was like, are you sure you want to say? Even though
I think I'm not.
you could just tell us secretly later.
Hold that thought for hopefully Friday's newspaper. But the holiday lights are going to be kind of kicked off at the celebration that we always do at Plenty Park. That 14-foot tree came from Dummerston Elysian Hills Tree Farm this morning, thankfully from the Retreat Farm, who rescued me because I was in need of a big enough truck to take that tree. And so at 5:30 the celebration starts. We are going to have singers from the BUHS a cappella group. We're going to have Hot Chocolate from the Works. We are going to have Kristen Cassidy from Bodie Fit leading an intention ceremony around the holidays so that people can take a moment and think about what they want out of the holidays. And then we're going to close it with the lights coming on and more singing, of course. We are supporting, one of the things that we're really trying to do is not recreate the wheel and also not recreate or not create more things in town, because we have so much to offer in our town. So we really try to magnify what's already happening. So we're magnifying what holiday pop-ups are happening downtown. There are many. We're magnifying what the merchants are doing for the holidays. We are magnifying what Kate and the Chamber is doing for holidays and holiday nights. And then for the first time, we're really trying to connect the downtown with the Cotton Mill Open Studios holiday event. and we have given them one of our economic development grants to have a shuttle that will go from Cotton Mill to downtown in a circle, so people can park at the High Grove lot or the transportation center, take a free shuttle up to the Cotton Mill, and vice versa. One of the big motivations there that we hope makes it successful is that they usually fill up and don't have enough parking. So that's a driving force to also get on the bus. And then we are very busy planning 2 upcoming events, our 4th Brat Love Crawl, and then our new program, which is a short-term summit in May for the entire state of Vermont. So that's where we're at right now. I can move into the new budget unless you have questions on current.
Anyone have questions?
Not yet.
Not yet, so.
Okay, so new budget. Our budget passed with flying colors of our board and then membership, and now we're with you. This is a budget very unlike the budgets you have seen in the past, where we have worked really hard to stay as close to possible, if not exactly the amount that we get from the special assessment tax. And my new board did a great job at pushing to say we need to actually have our budget be reflective of our actual scope of work. And so this is what you're looking at with this budget, is it's reflective of what our scope of work is going to be. I don't think I have any particular thing that I want to highlight in it, but very open to hear what you all are thinking.
The one thing, Stephanie, that we probably do want to highlight is that you're asking for 80,000 this year.
Yes, so
Okay.
somewhere along the line, the DBA asked for 80, or BABB asked for 80,000, and then somewhere along the line it got changed to 78, and then I remember it get changed to 76, and then we brought it back up to 78, and now we're just saying, can you reinstate it to what the property owners vote or deemed okay for the special assessment tax? So that's the full 80.
Does anyone, David?
Yeah. These are kind of silly questions, but I'm just curious. What is the play date?
Oh, I didn't even say that.
I was going to point out that you didn't mention Playdate, which is one of
Playdate's
your.
awesome.
Is that the thing that goes where the parents come down and drop kids
Yes,
off?
monthly childcare by donation.
Explain it. Say more for the people at home.
So Playdate is monthly childcare by donation, and it's one of the reasons why I sit on the coalition of the childcare counts, because they noticed what we were doing and invited us in. We had our best Playdate ever. It was our 10th Playdate, so we do them monthly. We took off a month in the summer, but it was the best ever, serving almost 50 children at 4 different locations. The other thing that we did, which I love, is instead of asking for donations from the restaurants, we paid them 50%. So supporting the very people that we're trying to support as well. And Playdate has just blossomed into what people describe as an asset to living in Brattleboro.
Great. And the other thing, what is the short-term summit?
Short-term rental summit is, several years ago, we called together a meeting of short-term rental hosts, which is Airbnb, VRBO, all of that whole world. And we brought them in for a meeting of just how can we interact with you? What do you need? You are interacting with all these visitors in town, tell us more. And so that was a couple of years ago. And since then, it continues to be looked at really as a new industry and an ability to bring visitors into the area. And so we are taking advantage of that and saying, let's as a state come together and look at this new innovative part of our economy and look at it in 3 different ways. One is these people are Vermont ambassadors. They're representing our state and our community with every person that they host. So let's look at how do you be the best Vermont ambassador you can. The second line is policy. how can we not just be defensive, but look at what our community is doing around the United States that is advancing this in a smart way? You know, let's learn from other communities of it not going well. Let's learn from communities where it has gone well and look at what that policy could be. And then the third track is a regulation best practices. So the insurance or noise and noise ordinances, those types of things. And we've gotten incredible response so we've reached out to inns and bed and breakfasts, we've reached out to legislators, we've reached out to associations, and I'm really excited that we've been able to get national sponsors for the summit, so we're excited about it.
Great. One more, but I don't want to take up all the time.
Go for it.
Well, it's not actually, I noticed that you spent quite a bit on more than you budgeted for the organization committee. And you obviously spent on other committees too. But I wonder.
Wait, on which one?
The organization committee.
Oh, and this is FY18, correct?
I'm looking at the July 7th, July 17. Oh, so I'm looking at the wrong budget. Well, that explains that.
Well, you're looking at the budget that ended
Right,
June
that ended
30th,
June 1st,
2018.
yeah. Okay, never mind.
Scratch that question.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I just wondered if focusing on organization was why you had the increases you talked about in terms of community involvement and coalitions and board members and stuff.
Yes. Yes, if you have somebody who's working to develop relationships and organize people and greet volunteers when they're ready to volunteer and manage volunteers, then you get a better return on all of that. Yeah.
Anyone else on board have questions? Did you have some, Tim?
I
I don't want to put you on the spot, but you were it.
Sure. I have probably an easy one and a more maybe complex one that you can mull about. The Brattleboro Live, what is that?
Brattleboro Live is, the idea is that every single day and every single night there's something live going on in Brattleboro. And it goes along the same concept of we don't need to create something live, we need to show people that it's what we already have. And in my dream of dreams, Brattleboro will hold the same weight that Northampton does. Oh, we have a babysitter, let's head to Northampton, something's happening. And they have that reputation, and they have for years and years, and it's rooted. And so how can Brattleboro get that? So it is a campaign to say every single day, every single night, Brattleboro has something live going on. And we have met with all the venues and the pseudo venues, not the, like Echo has live music. So we've met with all of those people, and they're supportive and excited and willing to put dollars behind it. And we just need to execute it.
So it'll be like a featured event per night?
No, I'm sorry, it'll be an advertising campaign.
Oh.
So print and radio, reaching out to people within the 50-mile radius to say, this is where you should go if you're looking for something fun to do.
Right, kind of a live calendar.
And the BrattleboroLive.com website is just a pointer to the Plan a Go-Go calendar.
Oh, I see.
And if you forgot what Plan a Go-Go is.
I didn't forget, I never knew.
Assumed we did.
My other question was sort of, this is your first year in the experiment of being the person that you're in. You are in charge of the organization, right? And I guess I was looking for you to make some comments about how that sort of transition has gone, and maybe your board member would like to chime in so that Stephanie's not giving her own report card. The changes and improvements I've seen, I think, are pretty positive for our town, and I just thought I'd give you the opportunity to kind of comment on it, what maybe you'd change, and from the board's perspective, what has gone well about it, what has maybe not gone well. I'm just leaving it as an open question.
What I would say, so I'm Peter May, and I'm a brand new board member, but I've known Stephanie for a couple of years and seen her energy in town with building a business and bringing that to the community. Plus, she has longevity in the community, having been a native. I used to live up in Putney and moved the family down to Brattleboro. I've been overseas for a couple of years and came back and set up my own business on the upper levels of town, not a storefront, but in the professional offices that are there. And as I was starting to reroute myself here, I said I want to do something. I've been on school boards. I was a town moderator in Putney for a year. And as I started to talk to, she caught me at the right moment when I was saying, I might be ready to join a board. And when she started to twist my arm, it didn't take a lot of arm twisting because I was here, at World Learning when BABB started, and there were some big infrastructure projects that were the beginning of that. And then I didn't really know what DBA was doing or that it had rebranded. And as Stephanie was telling me about, all of the things that's happening, and the fact that that was all happening on a mostly volunteer basis before an administrative position was put in place, I was just amazed. I mean, I said, there's something going on here that, now that I'm working downtown and patronizing the businesses really every day, it seemed to be a terrific opportunity to engage with my business community and the town. And what I will say is that, as a board, I think, I've only been to a couple meetings, but I've already seen, new energy coming in, plus the old timers who are contributing that history, which is so important. And what I said to Stephanie was, look, I know that one of my chief roles as a board member is to support the executive and make sure that she's getting the resources that she needs, that she can come to us for guidance around decisions, and that we can participate. And so far, I've seen her do that extremely well. She takes care of us in terms of providing information. She's very transparent. There are ways to get engaged through the committees that she's set up. And I think all of that is going extremely well, and I can feel the momentum of the organization, working in partnership with the chamber. I'm always worried we don't want to duplicate, the town's too small to duplicate all of the things that need to happen to support the town. But so for me as a new board member, it's been exciting to do that. I will say the biggest challenge is we have a full-time executive director whose salary and benefits need to be taken care of, and we've got a new budget this year. So I think the board has been very positively engaged with Stephanie to say, look, we have to be prepared to look at this budget again in January every month and say, how are we doing? Probably, to my mind, the biggest change in the budget is the fundraising goals. And so as a board member of other organizations, I think DBA has to become, in some senses, more of a fundraising organization than it's ever been. So looking for grants, and Stephanie's got a grant writer on a part-time basis who's able to help scope out the resources that we're going to need. I've always said that if you're a board member, you got to give, get, or get off. So we're trying to establish a culture where the board, even though some of us contribute as businesses, we're also contributing a little bit more, to pave the way for, especially for foundation gifts and things like that, where they want to see a full participation from the board on fundraising. So, we've got our work cut out for us, but I'm very positively impressed as a new board member, and I would welcome any of my colleagues, Dick and others who have been around for a long time. But it seems to me like the organization is poised to really be an even more influential asset for the town.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Peter.
Brandon, do you have questions?
I actually just have a comment. I have full faith in you, in your position. I enjoy seeing the things you do. I think they're very visible. It's very different to look at this budget because I've seen what you do without you having to come in here and say, oh, this is what we do. I mean, you did say that, and it was highly detailed, and I appreciate that, but it was comforting to me to already know, like, oh yeah, I've seen that. Oh yeah, I've seen that. Oh yeah, I forgot about it. You've done a very good job, and I trust you implicitly, even if discussions start to come up that are going to be maybe challenging and uncomfortable. I know that you're in the right place to do these kind of things, and so I'm glad that it's you that we're working with in this capacity.
Does anyone in the public have any comments or questions? I don't know if we need to, I think everybody's on board. I don't see any reason that there wouldn't be a town meeting morning article. We don't have the article to read tonight, and we'll probably, when will we get around to that? December or something?
January is when you'll be looking at the warning for
Yeah,
town meeting.
yeah. So,
I'm inclined.
I mean, does anyone want to make a motion at this point to say we want to, you know, do the 80,000, but then we actually have to officially put it on the town meeting warning with certain language?
That's right. And
Yeah.
we'll bring that to you when
Okay.
we bring you the warning in January. And in the
Okay.
meantime, the $80,000 as an expenditure line item is actually in the budget for the, so it comes in as revenue
Right.
from the DID
And goes out.
taxation and goes out to the payment to the.
Yeah, because you have to make sure, because right now it's under 78, so are you guys going to, for this year?
I thought we had adjusted.
Oh, maybe
that,
you
but
did.
maybe
Oh,
not.
I didn't, you probably didn't look, I'm sorry. But we'll just make sure it's changed to 80, and I'm probably wrong, and it has been changed to 80.
I have no reservations about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so since the article isn't being read, is there any concern?
No, that's what I'm saying, I don't think there's any concern, and then we just, when we do the town meeting warnings, we'll,
If it's lumped
We'll do
in?
the article.
Okay.
yeah, there shouldn't be any problem. And we'll just do it, we'll write, like, we have to just approve the official written warning like it's been in the past.
Will we get an opportunity to see the draft of that before it goes out?
Maybe.
Just in case? Is that
Oh,
what's
yeah.
the process?
Oh, yeah, because we're gonna vote on all of that at a select board meeting.
Okay.
So what happens is we get all the town meeting warnings and then, or the, you know, the language for each thing, and then we vote on it, and it'll say what it has in the past. It's very short.
Right.
It just basically says
Yep.
80,000.
If I could help take some
Yeah.
mystery out of it,
Yeah.
it'll be exactly the same wording as it has
Right.
been in the past, but it'll just say for the 80,000 instead of the 78. So there's nothing complex about the item. It's just the vehicle by which the select board recommends to town meeting and then town meeting approves that the levy be collected from the properties within the district.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll know, we'll tell you when it's on the agenda, and we'll tell you if there's a reason you need to be scared and come.
It's not gonna happen.
But I don't think you
Just
have
a
to
messy
be scared.
That's it.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Peter?
Sure.
Is the budget stuff that we're talking about right here, or is it in our books too?
It's both. I think everything you need is in
Because
your select board.
Oh, good.
I was a reject from my book, okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
Everything you need is.
I know, I just don't know. Okay, thanks. Next up on the agenda is the FY20 proposed budget. And we have 3 items tonight: capital equipment, capital projects, and the 1% local option sales tax. And we're going to start with the capital equipment. And if you tell, when we're talking about it, if we could indicate what page we're on.
Sure.
Not just for us, but for other people too.
Yeah, so I'll also say a little louder what you and I just spoke about,
Yeah.
so that the people at home will know that for tonight's budget discussion, unlike most of the nights, let me say, most of the nights, it's important to be following along actually in the proposed budget book, because there's line item details there that are pertinent to different department operations. And so folks, we always give instructions for how people can access that off the town's website. Tonight, because we're talking about capital, unless the conversation goes into a direction that I'm not expecting, everything that you're going to need to have in front of you for the discussion this evening, and therefore everything that folks at home following along would need to see, is what's in the select board's notebooks for this meeting. So people who are looking at the backup materials that were distributed last Friday
Yeah.
have everything in front of them that they need.
And it's online right now, so they could go look at it.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's right. That's
But they don't know that.
how they would access that. So, we've got 3 separate topics under the budget consideration for this evening. One's the capital equipment plan, one is the capital projects plan, and one is the next discussion in a process of several meetings at which the board will be looking at the 1% local option sales tax. Beginning with the 2 capital plans, I'd like to just set a little bit of background for those, and then speak specifically to what's in front of you tonight. So we've been working for the last several years. The select board, staff, the representative town meeting has supported this, the town's finance committee has supported this, we've been recognizing that we needed to commit more funding to capital, both replacement of equipment in a more timely manner and to the investment in our infrastructure. And we set as a goal 4 years ago, when we were at an expenditure amount in real-time dollars in the cash that's collected in that given year. We were at just over $350,000 at that time. We set as a goal that we needed to be at a minimum of $1 million, and we really recognize that we probably need to have more than that. I'll speak about that in just a minute further as to sort of how we've confirmed that a higher goal would be appropriate. But we set that multi-year goal of let's work our way up to $1 million, and this is the year that we've arrived there. So the first point I'd like to make is that this is another step and an important step along a process that we're doing to take better care of addressing our capital needs, both equipment needs and project needs. And the place that we're at now as we look forward is the ability to have, if we can maintain at this $1 million, maybe find ways in the future to even increase that, but at least maintain the $1 million commitment from taxes each year into capital, that we then would have the ability to use fund balance from the prior year's surplus to take care of slightly more than that. And what I believe that the work that we've done this year to be more precise and more long-term in our look at equipment demonstrates to us is that we will consistently need more than $1 million in capital in order to keep up with our needs. So speaking specifically to how that's reflected in the capital equipment plan, unlike the projects, which we'll talk about second, and where there's a lot more complexity to how long something might last and when it might need to be replaced, and therefore, like in what order things are going to need to be replaced. Our replacement of vehicles and equipment is actually much more predictable than that. These are discrete items. They're items that generally have a reasonably expected useful life. And so we can reasonably schedule, not to say that if you have an expectation something's going to last 10 years that you'll just absolutely replace it in the 10th year, but we can reasonably expect that somewhere around the 9th or 10th or 11th year we're going to be replacing that piece of equipment. And if we do a schedule over the long haul that identifies every single item that we might need to replace in the future, that we expect to replace in the future, and when over a 25-year period those things are going to need to be replaced, we actually take into account every single thing that we on the staff can foresee as needing to be replaced. The one exception to that, very occasionally, will be the Zamboni for the rink, because that actually has an expected life of 30 years. But in this particular 25-year plan, because our current Zamboni is very old, we actually do show it as a replacement item. Every other item on the list, including the aerial ladder truck that we are all familiar with because we're replacing one this year for the fire department, that has a 25-year expected life. So that and all other pieces of equipment have either the 25 years or a shorter expected life. Fire engines at 20 years, other equipment, fire department thermal imaging cameras and DPW road graders at 15 years. And then police and fire command vehicles, some 10 years, some in the 15-year range. The sidewalk tractors, snowplows, and the dump trucks we expect to get 10 years out of, and 7 to 10 years out of our pickup trucks of various sizes, and 5 years out of a patrol vehicle for the police department. So using those as the general intervals, not in every case exactly that interval, but that's the general target interval for these. We've created this 25-year plan that's attached to the memorandum that's in front of you this evening. It's a little unwieldy because it's a lot of years, a lot of columns, but you can see at a glance the expected costs. If you look at the bottom of that page, you can see how in the first year of the 25 years, we predict needing $721,000 to buy a $550,000 fire engine and approximately $170,000 worth of other equipment. And then going on from there, just very slight increases over time. Some years are stable, some actually decline just very slightly. But over the course of the 25 years, the annual amount increases to $912,230. That's an average annual increase of about $8,000 a year. And $5,000 of that is accounted for in the way that we're proposing to fund fire engine replacement. So the two things that this represents as being substantively different from how we've gone about capital replacement in the past are that we believe that this represents the real needs of the town looking out over the long term and the way in which we can keep up with the funding needed in order to accomplish the timely replacement of these. And we also have created something that we're proposing, or we would create if you approve it, that we're calling the Fire Engine Replacement Fund. We've experienced in the last few years as a community what happens when in 4 or 5 year period we have to replace 3 or 4 fire engines. Because fire engines are by far the most expensive items that we have in our fleet, when we have to replace them, in any case, whenever we're replacing one, it always represents a very large expense that crowds out other capital needs in that particular year. When we have multiple years in a row where we need to be doing this, it crowds out a cycle of replacement that we really can't afford to let happen because things fall apart. And so the position that puts us in is what we did this past year, where staff recommended, the board approved, took it to town meeting approved, that we borrow half of the cost of the new fire department aerial ladder truck. So in this budget that's before us, it's not the part of the budget that's in front of us tonight because it's in the operating funds to pay back the debt, but we are incurring an additional cost of $60,000 a year this year and for the next 10 years, $50,000 of which is the principal amount of that loan, but $10,000 a year is the interest that we're paying, which will accumulate then to slightly over $100,000 over the course of the payback of the loan. What we're proposing with the Fire Engine Replacement Fund is to turn that on its head and to accomplish two goals that are both important to us as a community. To accomplish the goal of keeping relatively more level the annual funding need for capital equipment replacement so that there aren't wild spikes up and down in the amount that's needed and therefore in the taxes that have to be imposed to fund the program, in order to keep that relatively more steady over time and in order to actually accrue interest on money that we're saving up to buy fire engines rather than having to pay interest in order to borrow money to buy a fire engine. We believe that's just a smarter way to go about replacing fire engines, and if we include that in this program, the accumulated interest that's estimated over the 25-year period is slightly in excess of $500,000. That's at just a 3%, which we think is conservative, given that we've been in historically low interest rates. They're headed back up, and they're already in the 2.5% to 3% range. 3% is really conservative, and we can reasonably expect that this funding program would bring in $500,000 worth of interest into the program, which is roughly equivalent to the cost of the fire engine that we're going to purchase next year. Obviously, we don't have the money saved up for that one yet. That would be the last time, if you approve this program, the last time that we would purchase with a full funding of a fire engine in a single fiscal year. But the sum total of this is we think that $8,000 a year in increased cost, establishing a baseline and increasing by only an average of about $8,000 a year is a sustainable way to fund our capital equipment replacement needs. And we believe that by doing the relatively level funding with the $5,000 annual increases for the fire engine fund, that accounts actually for the lion's share of that $8,000 increase. It's $3,000 a year of average annual increase for all the rest of the equipment in the town. And the combination of that and the interest earnings, we believe, will make this an affordable and maintainable program for the town. So we're hoping that you agree. We're happy to answer questions that you have about it, but we would like to see this presented to representative town meeting, where, of course, as in any other year, it's the FY20 column that we're recommending for funding that would be actually approved for purchase in this year, but where the concept of sticking with this program in a steady effort over time, because of the various benefits I've just described and what that would present to a more maintainable budget. We'd like to see the select board endorse that and hopefully get the same kind of approval out of town meeting.
I have a question. I'm looking at the fire truck replacement plan.
Yes.
And I'm looking at engine 1, the duplex engine, and and I'm looking at it being replaced, projected around 2041.
Yes.
And my question to you is, are these projections based on replacing them before they break or run them into the ground projections?
That's a great point. So I actually brought with me something I was going to start with tonight. And then I decided not to try to be funny because I'm really not that great at being funny.
We'll handle that.
We'll be the judge.
Pretty serious guy. But actually, so a resident gave me a copy of the annual town report from 1932.
Okay.
Which is a really interesting read for those who want to take a look at it sometime. But there was one particular thing that is relevant to tonight's discussion that struck me. Speaking of when you push things too far and run them into the ground.
Yes.
86 years ago, the town report included this under the fire department. The old horses, which had been at the station for a number of years, had outlived their usefulness, and a new pair was purchased to take
Are they
their
talking
place.
about the Chiefs?
No, we're
The
not.
words out of my mouth.
So, the more things change, the more they stay
Yeah.
the same. And our predecessors 86 years ago said, those old horses are just too tired, we gotta have two new ones. What we're trying to do with long-range planning is not be in a position where we find that the trucks are failing
Okay.
and have to go out in a hurry to replace them. We've been through this in greater detail on other nights. I won't take too deep a dive except to just skim the surface, and then we'll go deeper if you'd like us to. But there were some decisions made a generation ago, for instance, to put fire engine equipment on commercial truck chassis rather than to buy a custom-made, more expensive, more substantial fire engine.
Yes.
That caused us over this last several years to multiple times face the situation that something was actually, in one case, not able to pass inspection, and in other cases just failing and having to be replaced in an emergency manner. When we do that, we don't get the best value, we have to borrow money, there's just all kinds of bad impacts above and beyond the fact that an essential piece of equipment is, for a period of time, not useful. And so while we recognize that over a period of time, if we look at a 25-year period, there's going to be quite a number of different items here that don't work out just exactly as we forecast.
Right.
We'll make intelligent, informed decisions year by year of what we bring to you and what you approve to actually fund in any given year. But by sticking generally with this program, we're going to replace things before they fully wear out. We're going to reduce maintenance costs, and we're going to reduce those crises that
Excellent. That's what I
otherwise
wanna
come
hear.
upon us.
Just don't want to set us up to
Repeat
that disaster.
And that's why we think that the fire engine part of this is especially important,
Yeah.
because it actually makes all the rest of it more sustainable, because we won't have those big spikes that we have to accommodate when we do have a fire engine that we need to buy.
This is great, by the way. I appreciate this.
Thank you.
I should have started my comment with that. But.
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
I have comments, not questions, yeah. One is that this is kind of a continuation of the work that, started, or people started asking for several years ago about we need to be looking more long-term, we need to be planning better, we keep getting these unpleasant surprises, and it's really hard fiscally, and taxes keep going and going and going. And I just want to point out that this is, to me, the description here on the equipment replacement program, and the same is true of the one on the fire truck as well. Yeah, I think it really is, it's an example of what the term prudent actually means. We're talking about modest increases, which means that we're going to pay a little bit over a long period of time, but I just want to read what you said here, because you didn't say, you said it in pieces, but you didn't put it all together the way this does. Adhering to the general scope of this schedule, this modest increase, will reduce long-term maintenance costs. That's a reduced cost. It will eliminate large annual changes in the cost of the program, of the capital equipment program, and the unexpected large annual changes like a ladder truck. It took us a year. And then we had to go a year with an old one, and then another year to get the truck. So it's expensive, and it's potentially dangerous. And the other is which complicates planning for other town needs, obviously, but it avoids the necessity of unplanned emergency purchases that when something fails instantly, and requires, the thing you didn't mention is the bonds. We have to bond and then pay interest. So we have to give money to the bank as well as the manufacturer of the equipment. So it seems like this really is a modest increase. It's really not a big ask. And the long term, the quality of the effects, it's sort of amazing that it didn't happen decades ago. But here it is, and I'm really glad that we're going to get a chance to promote it with the town.
Yep. Does anyone else on the board have any questions or comments?
I'll make a couple comments. At first, when you told me about this, my first instinct was that it's sort of a hard sell for this board to tell the citizens that we're going to have a line item for something that we don't have. In fact, we won't have for quite a while. So on one hand, I think it's anti-Yankee frugality in that sense, because at town meeting you expect to be voting on things that have tangible results and coming in the next year. But on the other hand, it's the definition of frugality because, as you said, it kind of flips the script with the bonding out of things. And I wanted to call it the layaway plan because I'm trying to figure out how to educate people what this will look like. But as you pointed out, it's a layaway plan that accrues interest, which is even better than a layaway plan. So I think it's great. I think it's some really nice work that you've done. And I think it's incumbent upon us to find ways to communicate why it's good and sell it, so to speak, at town meeting. So.
Now, can I just ask a question about that? We're not going to town meeting and asking them to approve a 25-year
Absolutely
plan.
not.
Work is going for 2020, but what we should do is as you just said, I agree with the last part you just said, is sell people to the idea that this is a good idea.
Right. So that
Because 10
next year,
years from now,
and the year after,
right.
and the year after,
There's a line
this
there
process
that we
is
fund
It's
every
following
for that
through on what we
grant.
believe is the right way to do this process.
That's right.
And in that spirit, there's a couple of things, if I may,
Yeah.
add. I think we should go quickly through what actually the specific items are that are on the 2020 list.
Yes.
So that that's known to the public and addressed explicitly by the board. And in that context, you may find that there's certain items that you want to hear from a department director about, things that are specific to their operations, which is the opportunity for me belatedly to say something I should have said at the very beginning. I really appreciate the support that you're all expressing for this. Tim, just now you said something to the effect of great work that you did. Y'all would have been an appropriate personal pronoun.
Oh, you is definitely plural.
Yeah, this was a huge undertaking that involved, the entire management team, and for some of the larger departments, certainly other employees as well, to assist in the process of sorting out, making sure that we've got proper estimates, making sure we've got proper intervals. Patrick did the heavy lifting of actually creating the spreadsheet, and then we went back and worked through as a management team, making sure that the adjustments that we had made felt like they were proper adjustments so that we could actually represent to the community this is a sustainable plan. So it's our plan, and I'm grateful to the team.
You can't just Google long-term capital plan and get the spreadsheet?
Stop giving away secrets.
So in 2020, we're proposing for the fire department a thermal imaging camera for $10,000. For the police department, 2 police vehicles, each at $50,500. And replacement of the guns and holsters for the officers at $35,000. Tactical ballistic vests for $12,000. And an dispatch recorder, the booking fingerprint scanner for $25,000. In the Public Works Department, we have a pickup truck for $46,500 and a dump truck for $170,000. And in the Recreation and Parks, a pickup truck for $46,500 and a zero-turn mower for $18,000. Those will be the specific items that they're reflected in the budget document in the capital equipment request for this year, and they'll be the items that we're asking town meeting explicitly to authorize us to purchase if you agree with this recommendation.
And part, I think, of what's important for us to, well, we don't even really have to keep this in mind because God knows I'm not going to be sitting here.
Can you speak up?
Oh, I'm sorry. We don't, this is just something, these figures, like 45 years out, we don't know that this is what this stuff is going to cost.
Absolutely.
So, but it's a good idea to, I totally agree with this
Thank you.
plan. I just think,
Yeah.
who knows, there could be better technology. We might not, Steve might not need us another
So
dump truck.
That's very true. The other thing is each year, just as we've traditionally updated a 5-year plan, each year we'll update
Yeah.
this plan. And,
Yeah.
you know, the out years won't change a lot unless and until there's a moment where we say, wow, we don't need one of those anymore. We
Yeah.
need to do something else because technology has changed.
Yeah.
But what will happen is, you know, the order of things will move around a little bit because of those things that are lasting better than expected or not as
Yeah.
well as expected. You know, so and there may be changes to the estimates, especially as you get out past, you know, the first
Right.
5 years or so.
Right.
What I should have said, though, also in the presentation, just so folks know that there was a methodology to putting a price tag on something that's 20 years away. What we did was just assumed a 2% rate of inflation. So what we find is in certain items, the rate of inflation actually in the last cycle of replacement has been greater. In certain items, it's been less. Without being able to be precise and confident that a number you put in a plan 20 years away is actually going to be the right number, we figured that those kinds of nuances are going to come out in the wash, and that as an order of magnitude of setting aside the right, you know, expectation for the amount of money that'll need to be set aside each year as we go through, that a 2% rate of inflation was a prudent factor.
Can I ask one more question? I don't know if this is going to be my last. You mentioned that we're putting this money aside, but also we're going to rely upon surplus funds on some of this
So-
stuff. And
so-
I'm just wondering,
Yep.
because I'm a delinquent and I don't have my book with me,
Yes.
and I'm assuming we're going to get to eventually how much of the 2020 budget we're relying on surplus funds.
Sure, so we can say that right
Okay.
now. So in the combination of equipment and projects, for the items that are proposed, it's $1.295 million, $1,295,000, where the million is in real-time revenue from FY20, and the 295 is use of fund balance, which would leave us right at the 10% set aside that our guideline suggests. So I should clarify when I talked about that use of fund balance piece, I think if we embrace this way of managing the long-term replacement needs for the equipment and the vehicles, that variability that's going to come year by year in the amount of fund balance that's available to commit to capital needs is going to be reflected more on the project side, not on the equipment side, because this will be our plan. And you know, again, if it's something that the select board embraces and the town meeting embraces, and we live with it and update it and tweak it year by year, you know, we're going to be putting in roughly the same amount each year with modest increases to sustain this plan. And because that's so predictable, that we should expect to just collect taxes for. On the project side, as we'll talk about in just a minute, it's a lot less predictable, it's a lot less consistent, and so it's a tougher task in the long run, but it also means that we have the ability to absorb a little more variability there, and need to, if that's going to be one that's going to rise and fall. You know, the commitment on that side of the capital schedule is going to rise and fall a bit more dependent on the available fund balance.
Right, and there's always, or there could be, debates on what the fund balance should be used for.
That's
See what I mean?
correct.
So to me,
Those
it's
are
like
always
we-
policy decisions year by year.
Right, so it's sort of like we have to look at
There will be.
2020, right? Yeah, there will be. So, I mean, for us at this particular moment, it's 2020.
Correct.
And knowing that we're relying upon some fund balance, but we'll get to that when we
Sure.
get to it.
Yes.
For the future, to say, oh, we're going to use fund balance is not a given.
No, in fact, just as has always been true of the capital planning, whether it's the capital equipment side or the capital project side, select boards and town meeting has never been asked to commit to more than the 1 year. It's always a plan out beyond the 1 year, and a commitment and an authorization to proceed with the first year.
Right.
And that has not changed, even though we've projected the cost of the program and the revenue needed for the program over the longer period.
Right.
May I move on to projects? Or do you have any questions about the equipment?
I want to ask people in the public too if they have any questions.
I had a question about the overall, and then remember last week I had a question about the capital request for this year. So I don't. Whenever you'd like a comment, do you want to go into?
Well, I want to ask the public about
Yep,
the equipment
that too.
first, but do you wanted to say something about equipment? Or do you want to?
About the overall plan? Yes. Just had one
Oh, yeah,
comment
go ahead.
or question
Yeah.
actually for Peter. I'm curious about, and maybe I'm missing something, but the
Yes.
2021 total.
Yes.
We have 2020 is 495,000.
Correct.
2021 it jumps to 721.
Right.
That's a $250,000 jump.
It is. So,
that's not modest, yeah.
No, but last year it was over $1 million. So what we're trying to move away from is, a year of $1 million, a year of 300,000, a year of 800,000, a year of 500,000. And so, getting away from those kinds of cycles, there's a first year of the sustainable plan. That first year is not this year. That first year is next year. This is the final year doing it the way we've done it for years, where we are reducing the amount we're recommending for equipment because we spent a lot on equipment last year. We bought the fire truck and among other things. And we're looking this year, where last year it was less for projects and more for equipment. This year is more for projects and less for equipment, netting out to slightly less overall. I think it was about 1.7 last year, and it's 1.3 this year. But what we're proposing as the way to make this all more predictable and more sustainable is that starting in 2021 with the 700,000 and moving on from there with average annual increases of about 8,000 a year, this is a way that we can all collectively handle that responsibility we have to prudently replace the equipment. Again, not in any faster time frame than we have historically. The 10 years expectation on a dump truck and the 20 years expectation on a fire truck and 5 years for the police vehicles is the interval that we've been working under for years. But we've been doing it in a way where we just had to kind of scramble each year to see, what was the most urgent need, what were we trying to avoid having fail out from underneath us. This is a way to stay ahead of those needs and replace them in a more systematic way, still expecting to get long life and good value out of each piece.
Right. Well, I want to believe. Any X-Files fans out there? I want to get behind it. I'm just still curious about the jump. Is it a little bit of kicking the can down the road to have that jump happen in 2021 under a different board? That's what I'm saying.
What do you mean?
What did I miss when I was in the bathroom?
Are you saying, is there something we should be buying now that we're delaying until 2021?
I guess I'm wondering if there's an $8,000 per year figure, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
starting in
that-
2021.
Should that figure be
I see what you're
10,000
saying.
and then make the impact in the first year less? Or is it a capital? Is it a request that we're catching up on?
Yeah, so I don't think, I'm going to repeat myself from what I said a minute ago, because I don't think I set the table well for this. If I had said
might
this
be me.
differently,
It might
I
be
don't
me.
think it is.
Okay.
I understand that point of confusion, and if I had said this differently in the first introduction of this, we might not be struggling with it. So what I will repeat myself to say is we've had a methodology we've applied to where our 5-year plan on equipment has been pretty real, but not completely real, and it involved definitely some things that we weren't really sure how we were going to afford, but we know that they're failing, so we've got to have it on the list. And our 5-year plan on projects, as we're going to talk about in a minute, is still in a condition that it's not at all realistic. We have this year we're proposing the things that we know need to be addressed, that we think we can afford to address this year. And then in the next 4 years we have, we have annual expenditures that if we actually implemented it as a plan would vary between about $1.5 million and $3.5 million. And we all know we're not going to spend $7 or $8 million in the next 4 years on capital, certainly not without borrowing, and we're not proposing to borrow it, in the scope of what's being proposed. So to get away from unrealistic capital plans that basically are just lists of needs with some sense of priority, but not with really a reasonable expectation that we could follow the plan and have the costs reflect in the upcoming budgets what we're suggesting is going to be needed. Instead, it's just, this year we're scrambling again, and next year we're scrambling again. We've, in that scramble, accomplished a lot together in committing more money and accomplishing more good in the individual fiscal years, but our process hasn't become more sustainable and more business-like, frankly, more of being able to look at the needs of the community over the longer term and know that we're planning well to address them. Again, we'll talk in a minute about the project side, where I think that that's going to be a lot harder to achieve, so we're talking about some interim work we think can move us in a healthy direction that doesn't get to anything nearly this specific. But on the equipment side, we recommend that we actually undertake this. And I would suggest that, again, back to repeating myself, that you really need to look at 2020 as the last year of the old way rather than the kickoff of the new way. And if you do that, again, because the reason I say that is, it's not smoke and mirrors like, hey, it's really a $300,000 increase, not a $8,000 increase. We could very well have done this exercise last year and said, look, we're able to reduce the amount from $1 million a year to 700, and that would have been false. It's neither of those two extremes, because the two extremes represent the significant increases and decreases that the old way required. So if we look at 2020 as the last time of doing it this way, where we believe that the portion of that $1.295 million that's available for capital, we believe is available for capital this year. We believe that the appropriate proportion of that for the equipment replacement based on our current needs is this figure. It's 400 and where are we? Thank you, 495, with $800,000 being committed to projects. And for specifics that we'll go through in a few minutes, that just happens to reflect sort of where we are in 2020, coming out of the last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years of doing it that way. What we're proposing is that in 2021, we would start a process at 721 of annual funding need, but that could carry us through where the increase again is approximately annualized average increase about $8,000 a year, $5,000 of which is directly accounted for by the proposed fire engine replacement fund. So it really maintains all but absolute steadiness in the replacement of all the other rolling stock.
Okay. I guess I was just looking to see if we should be concerned about that first initial jump to get it. Sure. As you say, it's a transitional jump.
Right. And it'll affect our ability to address project needs next year, for sure. And then there'll be a sort of equilibrium that we're going to look to try to achieve going forward from there.
Okay.
Is anyone in the audience have any questions about the capital equipment replacement fund? You can fight it out on who goes first.
Well, we're on the finance committee, I remember. I want to go back one page because I'm trying to figure out the $5,000 a year moving forward. Where is that? Is that going to be because I'm not clear. Is that going to be a line item in the budget, or how are
Absolutely.
you? I couldn't find it in the budget, so
Sure, I can point it out.
Okay, and so I guess I would ask you, rather than use that as a budgetary line item to generate the revenue for it, why aren't we taking it from surplus revenue and making a transfer into an account where it doesn't have an impact on the taxpayers. There's another way to get that $5,000, which doesn't come out of my pocket.
It very well might come from that. That was the point, I believe, and
Right.
don't mean to speak for you, but that
Right.
Kate was making earlier in the discussion, is that the fund balance decision is something that's decided year by year, first by the select board and then by town meeting. And so, yeah, it very well could be carried by that rollover from last year's surplus, rather than being something that is directly impacting taxes. But those decisions of where the revenue is going to come from will be made annually by select boards and town meeting.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm looking at the 1% fund, and the last 3 years, it has beat your expectation in the budget by 50,000 plus the last 3 years.
Meals and rooms, you mean?
Rooms and meals, excuse me. And so I'm going, why am I going to have to fork out $5,000 out of my pocket when there's this surplus money coming here, and I actually, saying, and a suggestion from the board to say, I like the idea, but let's fund it through here. And, you're right, this board can't compel the next board about how it wants to fund something. But if I'm sitting on the board next year, I'm going to go, yeah, I'm not going to raise taxes by $5,000 to put in there. I'm going to continue what this board was prudent to do and say, I'm going to save us $5,000 by getting this from surplus revenue, whether it was from the general fund or from the rooms and meals.
Sure. Yeah, and absolutely. So what this proposes is the way in which the town can stay after the systematic replacement of the equipment, capital equipment needs, over a long period of time, so that we're not in that scramble and having the additional cost and the service impacts of having things fail out from underneath us and having to hurry to replace them. What it doesn't bind anybody, but first of all, it doesn't bind anybody to even replace things on this calendar. We just think this is a good guide for us as we go forward. And we think that adhering to something that's on this order of magnitude is going to be good for the town. But it doesn't at all speak to whether it's, there's a portion of this that certainly will be accomplished through grants. There's a portion of this that, will certainly have to be collected through taxes, but then there are other sources. You point out one of them. There are others. There's one that the board's going to give consideration to tonight and in future weeks. It would be a new source of revenue potentially for the town. So there's a lot of different ways to fund this, and those are decisions that would be made, in this budget cycle and future budget cycles. What this is intended to do is allow us to forecast better what our needs are going to be, the next 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road.
Well, you're just talking about one piece of equipment because it's the most expensive equipment. In any given year, we can have, the dump trucks we're buying are $175,000 a year.
Correct.
The grader
That's
is
correct.
or a $300,000 purchase. At any given time, the board could be faced with saying, you know what, we're saving $5,000 a year for that fire truck that we're going to buy. Hopefully, some of you people will be around in 2040. I'm not sure I'm going to make it that far. Hopefully I do. But the reality is every year there's a potential for a large ticket item to fail and for the board to have to fund it some way, somehow.
Right.
And so I guess the question would be, why only 5,000?
It's an incremental increase of $5,000. It's not a $5,000 line item. The line items actually start at $110,000 in 2022 for the fire truck fund, and then there's an item in each year of the 25-year plan. The highest figure it gets to with those $5,000 annual increases is in 2045, a $225,000 contribution to that fund. And on the
Can I just point out where that is?
Sure.
It's the fifth line down from the top.
so it is
That-
part of the overall.
On the first page.
It is part of the overall program, which is why I've been describing it as accounting for $5,000 of the average annual increase of about $8,000, because the whole plan, when you look at the bottom line, increases by an average annual about $8,000. Some years it's a little more, some years it actually goes down, some years it's nice and steady. And that's where those larger pieces of equipment come in that aren't generational in cost, right? So the dump trucks, they run from $150,000 to $250,000. It's a big ticket item, but it's a big ticket item that in the broader context of this plan, when we look at when the different dump trucks are going to be replaced, we can make sure that in a dump truck year, we have fewer other things being replaced. And then in a year when we're not buying a dump truck, we have the opportunity to do more of the smaller items. The fire trucks are harder to do that way because they eat up, all of an annual average year. And then, what do you do with those other things that are wearing out? So that's why we're suggesting exactly that by putting in a little each year into a fire truck savings account, basically, we will gain the benefit of the interest that's earned on that. That'll help us buy the fire trucks, and it'll make it a more sustainable plan for everything else. So we don't have to go and buy a dump truck because it's failed, but buy it because it's just getting old and needs to be replaced.
Makes sense.
Franz, did you have a comment or question?
Franz Reichman, Finance Committee. I hope you'll bear with me. I've got a few things here. I wonder if I could start just to satisfy my own curiosity by asking Chief Bukowski how our newly acquired old ladder truck is doing, since that was something we talked about a lot at town meeting, was how much life the one we got from Sharon might have, and I just wondered how it's holding up. It is. Good. Okay. Well, thank you. Glad to hear that. Well, one thing, and tell me if I've got this more or less correct. 2021 looks to me like a hybrid year, where we start making a payment on this new fire truck replacement fund, but we also buy a new fire truck in the same year.
Actually, no, and I may have misspoken a moment ago. I'm sorry. I think I did say that the first year at the $110,000 contribution to the fund is in 2021. It's not. It's in 2022. Oh. The reason that we start the fire truck fund in 2022 is because we do have one more fire truck that we need to buy with just 1 year's money in 2021.
Yeah, it's clear on the printout that that's the case.
Yeah.
Also,
Thanks,
I think you can go online and download a smaller font than this if you look.
Fantastic.
Touché.
Okay, thank you. And now, I guess one of my ongoing concerns is how the decisions are made on vehicle replacement. I'm far from any kind of automotive anything, but just going online and looking at how different departments in different places manage their turnover of vehicles, there's quite a number of different ways that it's done, and quite striking differences in the results. I mean, there are some places that are keeping vehicles for twice as long as other places and things like that. The things that I've seen relate to age, mileage, engine hours. Sometimes they put those things together in some kind of a formula. And then there's just the question of wear and tear and maintenance costs. And I wonder, what, if any of those, versus just seat of the pants,
Sure.
It feels like we need a new one, we're using, especially as we're projecting this out over time. The place I've seen the most detailed information on is police vehicles. Yeah. And some pretty innovative stuff being done to limit the engine hours, at least by providing battery backups for electronic equipment, which need to be powered pretty much nonstop. So I'm just wondering, how'd you figure all that out?
Sure. So we can take as deep a dive as you'd like into particular departments and particular pieces of equipment, because we don't have a single standardized way that we apply a formula town-wide, but we use exactly those factors that you're talking about, and it's different factors make a greater impact in some departments and for some vehicles than others. And then, so for instance, the engine runtime is especially important for a fire truck, which isn't necessarily going to collect a lot of miles over those 20 or 25 years, but is going to run for a long time while it's powering the function of the engine at a fire scene. So engine runtime is very important there. For some of the other vehicles, engine runtime is a less significant factor, miles and just, maintenance costs. So again, looking at fire trucks, we're less concerned about the actual maintenance cost of a particular vehicle except in the situations like we've had in the last few years where we've had stuff wearing out right underneath us. But in places where, in parts of the town where we've got a fleet that's larger, so the dump trucks in Public Works or the police cars in the police department, there are times where a vehicle is not lasting as well as what was expected, and something else might be performing better, and you change up the order in which you're going to replace them, because there's enough of those particular items that to keep the fleet functioning properly and not have our maintenance costs skyrocket and not have a bunch of stuff that's out of commission, you've got to be replacing them with some regularity. But it doesn't mean that on the 5th year you automatically replace a police car no matter what its condition is, or on the 10th year you automatically replace a dump truck no matter what its condition is. So there is those kinds of methodologies are applied. They're applied in our system in a more decentralized manner that's specific to the functional areas where the equipment's being used.
So if we're replacing police cars, say, every 5 years,
Right.
then what we'd anticipate is that most police cars, most commonly, are going to need replacement in 5 years.
That's correct.
But if we get a really bad one, it might have to be replaced sooner. If we get a really good one, it might last a little longer.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's actually what we have already been doing. We've been doing it without the benefit of the longer term perspective. And so each year, the decision we make about what we can afford to replace is seat of the pants.
Okay.
What can we afford this year? As opposed to what do we need to do this year to keep up with the long-term needs?
All right, and I wonder if there's been any thinking of, what vehicles we might acquire and how they're equipped in terms of promoting vehicle longevity.
Yeah.
And
So-
particularly with regard to the electronics issue.
Yep, absolutely. So the chief could actually speak to that. I know that the police cars have 2 batteries for exactly that reason. There are, I'm sure, some other examples that department heads might cite. That's the one that comes to my mind immediately, of ways in which the equipping of the vehicle has changed in order to accommodate the modern technology.
If I may backtrack just a little bit to go into the replacement of vehicles. Even in our own fleet, we have vehicles that are replaced every 10, 12 years. We also have vehicles that are replaced every 5 years. So along with everything that was mentioned, you really have to look at what is the function of the vehicle also. And our patrol vehicles are the ones that are replaced every 5 years. The other vehicles are major crimes, major incident, animal control. They're on anywhere from a 10 to 15 year cycle, which probably resonates a little bit better with the community because, I drive an 8-year-old car, I don't go out and buy a new car every 5 years. So the functionality or the function of the vehicle plays a huge part. And we are loading those vehicles more and more and more with electronics that draws power. They're heavy vehicles. They're not your commercial vehicles. When we put in the back, that is all metal. We take out the seats. We put in the reinforcements all around it. It's got the lights. It's got a heavier suspension, heavier motor. So and they're driven aggressively when they need to be. So the wear and tear on a police cruiser within, I want to say on the average, 4 to 5 years, we start seeing our maintenance cost go through the roof, where we're turning them in and getting $2,500 to a $3,000 maintenance repair on it. More times than not, if we're close to that 5-year cycle, we'll deadline the vehicle instead of putting $5,000, $3,000, however much into it, because I'm not going to get that on the trade-in. When we go for our trade-in, we usually $1,000, $1,500 if we're lucky on our trade-ins. So I'm not going to put excess of that amount in a vehicle that I'm not going to get nothing in return with. So we'll just hot rack cruisers and keep them going that way. So that's pretty much how we monitor the fleet. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I know there's gonna, if I may add one more thing, I know a lot of people talks about the hybrids, and I don't even know if I said that right. Is the-
I already wrote down, nope, probably not. One of my notes.
Ford is coming out with one in 2020, which is cruiser pursuit rated. So it is on the horizon. A lot of communities, a lot of departments are thinking about it. We'll see how that does. I absolutely don't recommend being the first department to buy one, because I'm sure there's going to be some bugs. But just wanted to put that out there because for the past several years, we've been getting asked questions about that. And we hear you, and we've been researching it. And like I said, Ford in 2020 will be coming out with their first model or version of a pursuit-rated hybrid.
Great.
Awesome, thank
And
you.
just for the public's benefit, if I can add to that, I know the board is well aware of this, you authorized the purchase, but in Public Works earlier this year, we bought a plug-in hybrid vehicle that's gonna be running with the way we need to use it. It's gonna run almost entirely on the plug-in electric, but it'll have an internal combustion engine to back it up when it's needed. That's for a piece of equipment that's not gonna be a big, heavy piece of equipment. The technology also hasn't advanced far enough for us to be able to use it by hybrids for dump trucks and the other heavy equipment. But that technology is changing all the time, so we keep our eyes on that, and we will seize the opportunities when we can, as we could earlier this year for the engineer.
I wasn't, I don't know if anybody construed it that way, I wasn't suggesting hybrid vehicles, but I wonder if a plug-in battery pack for the second battery, if that's being used for electronics, might save some engine time in terms of recharging that specific battery. Oh, thank you. Okay. In looking at your fire department, your fire truck replacement fund, something missing, I think, and I'm not saying it should appear on this piece of paper, but to really evaluate that, we would need to know what the replacement schedules might be without the fire truck replacement fund. Tracking it over the years to see how much we're saving up and how it adds up in terms of the projected need. So it was hard for me to look at it and say, oh, that's going to be enough, or that's going to be too much, et cetera.
I don't think I understand your question. You mean the accumulation of the funds?
Yes.
That's shown on the second page, I'm sorry. So the first page that's got a lot of numbers is the overall plan. The second page that only has 6 or 8 lines to it, 6 or 8 rows, has the same 25 years, and it shows the accumulation of funds in the fire truck replacement program, or fire truck replacement plan, including the annual interest that we're projecting. So if you look down at the bottom of that second page, bottom of the chart.
I'm seeing, I completely missed that.
Okay.
But I'm also, I don't see a ladder truck on here. And
It's the last item in
the last
2045.
2045, got it.
Yep, $1.5 million.
So that's not the total, that's the last item. Right. Okay, and so that all adds up to the amount in the fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And we show the cash flow of the fund in those bottom 3 lines.
Nice work. Thank you. So in different years, there clearly would be a huge amount of variability potentially in the fire department's need for equipment replacement. There's less variability in public works, but it's still, a threefold variation or more from some years to others. Why not apply the same methodology to public works, say?
So we could, I believe that even with the dump trucks being expensive and the occasional grader purchase, that we're able to accommodate the peaks required for those very large pieces of equipment within this plan by the spacing of the smaller items. And if we took each separate group of items or at least 1 or more 2 bites at large ticket items, and funded them the same way as with the fire trucks. I'm concerned that the dynamic tension that we've already had around that particular concept in our conversation this evening would be harder. It would actually be fabulous from long-term financial planning point of view. But I thought that this plan, as we proposed it, better reflected the balancing act between what it feels like to be setting money aside. Forgive me, Dick, but as Mr. DeGray said earlier, contributing now to something he may not see at the end of this plan. I hope you're here in 2045, but that it requires that kind of foresight and commitment as a community to sustain a plan like this, that we need to be willing to commit our annual increments for some things that some of us may not see at the end of the program. And I think that's necessary for us to do this right as a community for funding of fire engines. But it's not necessary for us to do that for the other large pieces of equipment. We can accommodate the annualized need by just working around those peaks. And so that's what we've tried to do.
Fair enough. Now, and I think it brings up sort of my next point, which is you'll clearly need buy-in from the community on establishing this fire truck replacement fund. But I'm not sure what exactly you were referring to in terms of town meeting. And I mean, I'm not sure how you would put that forward in any formal sense or what the effect would be. And I can imagine it taking up a fair amount of time to discuss that.
That's what I was making the point, that we can only focus on 2020. And we can sit there and say, we think it's a great idea to have this 25-year, 40-year, whatever plan, but we can't enforce it. No select board can enforce it.
That's correct.
So, but if we start it, we say we believe.
Yeah.
You make it a cultural thing,
That's
perhaps.
exactly right. And so, while there's not a binding decision made at this level or at town meeting, that this is the way it is, this is the way it's got to be, tough luck for somebody who comes along a decade from now and thinks differently about it, that's not in play here. That's not
Or how to pay
possibly the outcome, right? But for us to just talk about 2020 in the same old way and leave this, we've had a long conversation about this tonight. I do expect that we may have a long conversation about it at the information meeting so that people can understand the context in which, we're looking at the 2020 expense, but even more so at where we're headed from here. We hope people will understand this and pick at it and see the pros and cons and have a good conversation around it. Maybe town meeting isn't going to be the place for that, but in the absence of community involvement in this, we don't get any sense, the select board members don't, staff certainly doesn't, of whether continuing on down this path, whether our preparation in 2021 ought to look like something pretty close to what we've shown on this plan, or whether that's unpalatable for some reason to the community. I think it's important for us to have a way to get that feedback and guidance for next year.
Yeah, I agree. What you were talking about, though, just triggered in my mind, well, how does that interact with town meeting as we know it?
It won't be a warning item.
No, certainly not. But even, just how you're planning on bringing it up and how you're expecting to get feedback, I think merits a lot of thought.
We have to think about it, because we can't have a 5-hour discussion on something that we only are focusing for 1 year on.
Right.
And
What makes you think that's?
Yeah, right. We've done that before. So that is something to think about, because every year, everybody, there's a different rotating group of people who vote on the budget every year. So we can only do the best we can year by year.
Just think about it. That's all I'm really saying.
No,
So-
right.
I think the conversation is clearly going to come up when we get to this line, and it's going to be articulated and documented in the in the warning and in these minutes and in the conversation, hopefully in the newspaper tomorrow, and Brattleboro and anybody else is paying attention. But I think if we didn't have this conversation and weren't taking these steps, we'd have the conversation for hours that we've had in the past about, why aren't you looking further down the road? Why do we get this huge increase all of a sudden? Why can't you plan better, and why can't we? And why do these things all seem to blow up in the same year?
Why do we ever
And
serve
why are we paying so much debt service? And why do we have to borrow? all of those conversations, which take that time. And obviously, we're not going to establish what's going to go on even in next year's the budget after next year's budget. But we certainly are going to declare the intention of that line and have a record of it in the minutes and in the conversation and in the memory, in the collective memory of the people that stay on time into town meeting. And there'll be a point, I would imagine, in not many years when people won't even talk about this line. Well, that's the line where, that's our, what did you call, our layaway plan for the fire trucks. Oh, yeah, the layaway plan, great. You know, it won't be new. It'll be just what we do.
Okay, well, that's,
But we
you know,
won't have those extra maintenance costs and those debt service costs and those exploding budgets because of fire trucks that fall apart.
yeah, I think the term layaway plan, actually, I'm not saying that's the final answer, but it does have some familiarity to it, and
Except instead of
that's what people are
storing
gonna
any
need.
interest, we get the interest.
okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Now we're going to move on to capital projects.
So here the news isn't as great. For those of you who thought that there
That
was
was
great news
great,
embedded in that, yeah, which I do, but on the project side, we really don't. I can't be specific about how we intend to do better. We have another year of identifying things that really need to get done. I'll name them in a moment, to the tune of $800,000. And then just to be specific about what I alluded to generically a couple of minutes ago, you know, the next 4 years after that are $1,245,000, $1,930,000, $3,275,000, and $2,610,000. And that's just not a realistic plan. I can't stand behind this as being, you know, how we're going to address the town's infrastructure needs in the next 5 years. It is identification of order of magnitude costs of things we know to be needs that have emerged or are emerging that are going to become critical. If we don't get at them, we don't have a good plan for how to get at them. So the specific things for this year, let me name them and the costs attached to each, and then I'd like to describe how we do think we can start doing better on planning for projects as well as what we have more precisely addressed for equipment. So for the FY20 proposal for specific funding for capital projects, there's $250,000 for ADA improvements at the Museum and Arts Center that are required by the Department of Justice. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Burlington has communicated to us the expectation that we will comply or face consequences. So there's ADA improvements there that need to be done.
That deals with the Amtrak station.
With the Amtrak station at the Museum and Arts Center. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not for the museum portion.
Yeah.
Right, it's for the train station portion. The Brooks Memorial Library fascia, I believe it's the correct pronunciation, soffit trim. That's the, right up under the roof line, there's a cement-looking product. It's kind of a lighter color than the rest of the exterior of the building. Pieces of that are actually falling off, and it's hazardous to folks below. We need to replace that trim at $55,000. We also have a hazardous condition of windows that have worn out in the children's room of the library for $25,000, and a similar condition at other windows around the building, but we think that the place to address as a highest priority is the children's room for reasons I hope are obvious to everybody. So we're proposing $25,000 for this year and $25,000 for next year as window replacement in 2 phases at the library, but with the priority on the children's room. $300,000 for street paving and improvements and $70,000 for sidewalk repair and improvements and replacement rather are placeholders. That's not for a specific street or for a specific sidewalk. These are the programs where Steve and his team compile lists that we bring you during the course of the fiscal year as we implement the budget to identify, based on surveys that are done in real time, you know, where the highest needs are so we can put this money to the best work. The long-term needs for both of these areas, you know, far exceeds $300,000 a year of paving and $70,000 a year of sidewalk work. But it's, you know, what we believe is the prudent amount for this year. It does represent catching back up to, in the case of the paving, what had been our number for years, $300,000 a year steadily. We had gone down to $200,000 a couple of years ago, up to $250,000. We tried to get up to $300,000. We hadn't quite got back. This is the year we're proposing to get back to 3. And then in each of these 2 lines, we would like to achieve this if we can. Again, I'm not representing to you that it's a realistic expectation, but you see here the aspiration that the street paving would go up to 350 and then 400 and then remain steady, and that the sidewalk work would go up to 80 and then 90 and then 100 and then remain steady. Just because the volume of work that needs to be done in both of those areas is so great. Then in the one remaining item in the FY20 requests is for phase 2 of the pool renovations. We did phase 1 a couple of years ago to plug the leaks. The phase 2 work would be the replacement of the deck around the pool and the replacement of the boiler in the warming shelter, the building that's just off of the pool, but in that same facility. Functions as the warming shelter for winter sports. And then you do see here also additional years of forecast expenditures at the pool that we do hope to keep up with, because it's time for us to go through those multiple phases and get the pool back in shape. So that's the specific ask. May I take a minute and put that in the broader context of how we'd like to improve planning for projects? This is also reflected on page 2 of my memorandum to the Select Board from November 15th. What we're suggesting here is that staff alone can't create the kind of sustainable plan for projects that we believe we've proposed to you for equipment. But we know we can do better. And the way we propose to do better is to conduct a needs assessment where staff would begin the process by doing with our infrastructure, much as we did with our equipment and vehicles, just doing a complete inventory of everything that we know will need to be replaced at some point. So there's some things that we have that won't need to be replaced necessarily. But everything that is currently part of our facilities where we believe it'll need to be replaced at some point, just make that list for building systems as well as for infrastructure out in the community. And then hire a consultant, and I believe there's 2 different phases of this where we'd want to hire a consultant. I believe this first piece would be inexpensive. The second piece, not so much. So for this first piece, I think we could engage someone just to come in and sort of look over our shoulder, check our work. Somebody, and I'm not suggesting it would be Steve Horton. In fact, it's almost certainly not Steve Horton, but somebody like Steve Horton. We're familiar with the expertise he brings to building systems. Somebody who can take that kind of a perspective about infrastructure more broadly and say, well, you forgot about this, or what about that? Aren't you going to need to replace some other system that maybe we've overlooked? So for a relatively low cost, get a professional in to take an objective look and give us good advice so that we can come to you with great confidence and say, as daunting as it may be, this is what we believe to be our inventory of long-term needs. But because we know that we can't just turn that into a plan in the same manner as the infrastructure, or I'm sorry, as the equipment, in part because it's a much more complex assessment of just how long things are going to last and exactly in sort of what priority order things are going to need to be replaced. But in equal part because the certainty of what the funding will need to be from year to year. So I'm sorry I'm not articulating that well. What I'm suggesting is, we might know that, let's say, a window system typically in a building is going to be a 30-year life, just hypothetically. But we know that we've got windows that are in place 60, 70, 80 years later and not needing immediate replacement, even though they're old. So if we did a projection that said every window system in every building is on a 30-year schedule, we'd be showing you something that was much more expensive than what's actually going to need to be, and not reflect as close to what we think the reality of the equipment piece is, not nearly reflect the reality of what will ultimately happen with projects. So what we think we have is a situation where we'll always be doing that sort of what do we need as the highest priority now and in the near term, kind of an assessment year by year by year with projects. But we can do a better job of forecasting what is that need over, say, not just the next 5 years in a wish list sort of manner, but maybe over a longer period of time, in a more realistic manner, and identifying alongside the expected expenses some ways in which we think we can fund that. So sometimes we need to issue bonds when we're going to do a big building project, but other times it's grant funding or other sources of revenue that can be carrying the project program. So the way that we intend to get at that, once we've got this big list, is to then organize that inventory into the things that are failing or nearly failing right now as immediate needs, and then a short, medium, and long-term list. Best example of the long-term is everything that's at the fire stations and the police station. Because of the investment that we as a community have just made in those facilities, replacement of systems in those buildings is going to be a long-term need. But we'll have short and medium-term needs in all kinds of other places, and we will, for the foreseeable future, continue to have things that are just wearing out underneath us that we know we need to address in an immediate fashion. So we'd recommend breaking it into those 4 different categories, and then doing the planning phase. So we would hope to complete those first 3 tasks before this time next year, so that as we're working together on the budget for FY21, we're able to actually not only make some more informed short-term decisions for project investments in the capital plan, but also have an informed budget figure for getting that consultant assistant for the heavier lift that would involve actually assessing the conditions of facilities to create a more complete and reliable, not a schedule, but a projection of, in those, again, order of magnitude, short, medium, and long-term needs.
Now, the one thing, and this is like the elephant in the room kind of thing, there's no reference to the municipal center.
Correct.
And we can't get into this now because we have a long-term issue with the municipal center.
Right.
But aren't there any short-term things, or there's nothing that needs to be done in the municipal center in the last
So
five?
the one additional thing that has to be done in this building while we're figuring out what its long-term
Yeah.
future is finishing off the life safety improvements, and
Right.
those have already been funded.
Okay.
So we don't anticipate short-term needs. That's why you don't see the municipal
Okay.
center in the 5-year plan.
Okay.
But what you also don't see in the list of things here, there's a list of items in the project plan that are only those things where we've put money in someplace in the 5 years. And so what's missing is not just the
else.
municipal center, but entire other facilities,
Right.
as well as major building systems
Right.
in
That's
virtually
just,
all our facilities.
That's just like the most obvious, so I just wanted to make sure.
Sure.
Because we don't know what we're doing.
We don't, and so that's a micro
Yeah.
item, but in the macro, what we're saying is we need to know what we're doing. We
Right.
need to do this assessment so that we, even though it won't be a 25-year plan in the same manner as the equipment is a 25-year plan,
Yeah.
it'll be a more thorough and thoughtful way of identifying what our immediate, short-term, medium-term, and long-term capital needs are.
Does anyone on the board have any questions or comments?
Not quite yet.
2 quick comments. One was to save you, I think. You said you were going to complete these phases this year. You probably meant this fiscal year. Did you mean?
Yeah, no, what
this
I mean
year
is,
as in-
no, I mean in a year, I don't mean in the
year
next
from today.
5 weeks. What I mean is in a year's time frame, so that as we're doing budget work together a year from now,
Yep.
we're informed by those first 3 pieces.
I just wanted to give you that
Yeah, thank you.
option to take the longer time, because it's a big project.
Thank you.
Oh gosh, what was my other comment? Oh, I think it was just a general comment on, projects are much harder. It's the chaos theory that's involved in project funding is crazy. I mean, if you have a retaining wall that you think is going to last 50 years and suddenly it lasts 10, that's a wrench in the works. But it's admirable to be going after this. So thank you.
You probably shouldn't mention retaining walls because we haven't had one
Well,
fail
actually,
recently, so maybe just,
don't we have a retaining wall issue?
not yet.
Probably one somewhere. Does anyone in the public have any comments or questions about the capital project plan list? All right.
Put them to sleep.
See, now we're going to move on to our next topic, which is the 1% local option sales tax. And at the last meeting, what we decided to do was make sure that the town staff know what information we need to make a decision on this. And I know there's certain things that we have. Where'd that memo go? Patrick did a memo.
It's in the,
There it is, right
Oh,
here. So some of the things on the list is a detailed description of the statutory framework of the local option tax for Vermont municipalities, a detailed outline of the sequence of steps that the town must take in order to implement a local option sales tax, a complete history of previous town, I think it's consideration of the local option sales tax, an estimate of revenue to be raised, and a detailed explanation of how the figure was calculated, a detailed description of items exempt from sales tax, and we want to have another conversation about this on November 27th. Does anyone else have anything else to add to the list? I would like to add, in addition to a detailed description of the items exempt from the tax, a description of the items that are taxed.
Probably a good idea.
So I don't know if anybody
that's going to be a
else-
long one,
Yeah.
because it's easier,
Probably be
everything
like
but,
types or
yeah.
something. There's got to be a way to
there's-
group it.
Or maybe just the big things, or the, groups of
Yep.
Yeah.
categories of things that are
Right.
taxed.
So does anyone else on the board have any other things that they need or would like? Obviously, if we think of something at the next meeting, we can. but
Yeah, this
is not
seems
like
good to
This
me.
is not like the deadline of,
Are we, well, I had one more. I think I mentioned it previously to you, but I think I was looking for maybe some anecdotal reports from towns who had implemented and, how it went, because we have, how many towns? I have it somewhere in all my notes.
So that particular, I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
That particular one, we can definitely list the towns that
13 of
have
them.
adopted it. Because tomorrow is the one business day, like tomorrow at the end of the
Oh.
day, the books go out for next time. We won't have anecdotal information for next Tuesday, but certainly while you're continuing to consider this, we could talk to some of those communities and get some feedback about how it's gone. We can at least identify them for next Tuesday's conversation.
and it also depends on who
okay.
you, it depends on who you ask
A list of the towns, maybe.
in the community.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone could have a varying,
Well, that's fair too.
you know.
Yeah.
But that's fine,
It's
let's
all
get
action
it,
for
let's
the
get it,
board.
then we can see, because if you ask one person who thinks it's great, you might find another person who doesn't, but
Absolutely
you don't know
true.
who you're talking to. Not that I don't want that information.
I also, because I'm
You
an
might find
advocate,
out revenue totals too, though.
Yes, that would-
Comparable totals.
because as you all know, I'm an advocate for doing this and doing it now. And I've got a lot of data that I've found myself, so I'll be sharing that
Okay.
with the board and with the entire public. We're not really going to be talking about it much tonight then. We've pretty much decided that it's
Well, we did,
laying out what we're looking for the discussion coming up next week.
yeah, that's what, I think that's what we said last week, but that doesn't, I mean, doesn't it make sense to get the information and then talk about it? Oh, I'm sorry, when I turn this way, I start talking, so, I mean, we can talk about whatever we'd like, I don't want to be the one that says, we don't want to talk about things. It was just at the last meeting, we thought we'd do it this way, but we can have any kind of discussion anybody wants to have, obviously, tonight.
I think it's fine to wait. I don't want to disappoint anybody who might be here to hear us debate or something. But the advantage, hopefully, we might have Shanta
Yeah.
next week.
And are we expecting to have this on the ballot for town meeting, for instance, or?
That's what our
or for
decision
election?
is. Do
We'd
we
have
want to move
yeah,
it?
to put it on the ballot, yeah.
Yeah, or do we want to have it go to town meeting? You know what I mean? It's
Well, we need to look at the statutes, know which ways we can do
Right.
that,
Right.
yeah.
right, because it's,
yeah.
and one of the things we talked about is, it's obviously, and it's going to inform in many ways what our budget looks like. You know, because if you're raising a tax, the question is, what are you gonna spend it on? So, and if the plan is to raise the tax now and spend it, you know, during fiscal year 20, that makes a huge difference. So it's going to, however we go, impact the budget that we proposed in, you know, to town meeting. It could impact the budget we proposed to town meeting. It might not, but it could.
So we're wanting to
Yeah.
gather
Yeah.
this
So we
information
gotta work that out
and
too.
discuss it
So I think
early
this will
on.
be a couple, like, I think next week probably might be it might be our one and only discussion, or it might be the first of a couple discussions.
And there may be people who came tonight to talk about it because it's on the
Yeah.
agenda. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
should still.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
There's one.
yeah. We'll open it to the public now, Dick.
Yep.
One of the things I'd like you to look at is, right now, we use the state as our collection agency. And so we're only getting 0.67% of that 1%. The 0.33% goes to the state for a pilot program that they run. And actually, Brattleboro, before they implemented the 1%, was a recipient of some of those pilot funds. I would like you to look at the difference between what we get now presently versus what we would get if we collected the whole 1% ourselves as a municipality, as Burlington does, and I believe Barry might. I'm not sure about Barry, but I know Burlington collects the 1%. Now, for us to do that, that would require a charter change.
Exactly.
But that would be doable if there was support for it, maybe not the first year, but the second year, to recommend a charter change if it all went forward. But, you know, one of the things, I've got enough holes in me from trying to get this passed several times when I sat up there. If there isn't support here from the board to move it forward, then the reality is the administration's going to go through a whole lot of rigmarole, and if you're not willing to commit to moving this forward, I would ask you to pull it off the table, even though I'm a supporter of it, because I have to tell you, listening to you talk about the capital plan and the future capital plan, not only from the vehicular, but also from the structures and the operating budget, we're living in a community where more people tell me that they have to move because they can't afford to live here. And the only source of revenue that we really have, property tax and the 1% rooms and meals tax that generate any revenue. Now, back in 2012, I think that was the last year that I tried to get it through, the 1% fund that we were going to generate revenue was around $680,000, give or take a few dollars. And that was some serious money. And I believe now, when you just look at our 1% fund, how it is exponentially just climbing, that I would believe that there would be some serious money, I bet close to $1 million a year, if we implemented the 1% sales tax. But if the board is not committed, you know, and I'm looking for you to go, yeah, I'll support it to go to town meeting, but also you need to be able to support it and say, you know, I know this might have an impact on small business, but the reality is, in the totality of the town, we have to find a way to bring the sources down or drop some of our needs, plain and simple. You know, when I'm looking at that capital plan, I'm going, it's what it is. It's a plan. It's a goal. But if we can't afford to do it, the reality is we don't get the dump truck next year because we can't afford to pay for it. Even though we need it, if we can't afford to pay for these things, that's what I think is suffocating the town in a big way that maybe the administration and the board isn't totally aware of. I talked to the chief today, and the chief, Mr. Fitzgerald, and he was talking about expanding where his officers could live because it's so expensive to live in Brattleboro. And so he's allowed the people that he's hiring to live in Wyndham County and over in Cheshire County and down into Greenfield because it's more affordable. That's a sad thing to say. We can't get off the 12,000 mark for population. It is becoming more and more difficult for people to stay here and to move in here. And when you talk about economic development, one of the things that I always say is when somebody's looking to come somewhere, they're looking at your tax rate, they're looking at our water rates, which are going up. You know, we have water bills that are really, really high, and we're sitting on all this fund balance, and you're going to talk about it in March, and maybe lower those rates, which I strongly support. But if we don't do something about another revenue source for the town of Brattleboro, you're not going to worry about the businesses that go, you know, if you put this in, we're going to close up. The reality is, you know, nobody's not going anywhere because of the sales tax. I've always believed that. I'm not going to go to Florida this year because the sales tax is up, or I'm not going to go down to Connecticut because they've got a 6% sales tax. The reality is we need a revenue source, and we're limited to what we can do. So until the legislature gives us some other options, they've given us the 1% rooms, meals, and sales tax. And we have turned our back on the sales tax because we keep saying people are going to go to New Hampshire. People are going to go to New Hampshire. Nobody's going to New Hampshire. They're going to that computer. They don't have to get in their car and waste the gas. They're going to Amazon. Amazon is doing more damage to main streets in this country than any other business going today. And people in the community realize if they want to have a vibrant downtown, they've got to find a way to go downtown and shop. And I've said from day one, there's something for everybody in this community in our downtown at any price point you want, from $1 to $30,000, $40,000 with some of the artwork that's downtown. But you have to support the community if you want community. And if you want closed storefronts, then we're going to go on this path that we're going, because we're not going to have a lot of people around here because it's just going to be too expensive for people to have. The haves will be here, the middle income and the low income people will be gone. So when you're sitting here tonight, if you're not willing to stand behind this, don't make the administration jump through all these hoops looking for information that when it comes to vote, you're all going to go, no, it's going to be 3-2 or 2-2, however many people are going to be here, and it's not going to pass. Because these guys work too hard to make them do something that you're not going to support in the long run. The information that you're looking for would be tools that you would have if you're going to support it to say, this is what can help us, this is what we want to use it for, which would be a good discussion. But at the end of the day, don't make the administration do something if you can't support it. You know, if you're not thinking about supporting it, it's a waste of their time, and they have limited time to put forward. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Dick.
Is there any other public comment? Bronze.
Well, having just heard some of the unfortunate aspects of jumping through hoops, I'm going to propose another hoop, which is that I don't think anecdotal information is good enough. And I would hope that there's going to be a real body of evidence that can be put together, not just what happened in some town and what somebody thought about it, but what are the known effects insofar as they're available from economists, academics, et cetera, as to what happens when you increase the sales tax by 1% in a town like ours. So, you know, as much hard evidence as possible, I think, would be really helpful. The other thing is, it hadn't really occurred to me that this would be a source of extra revenue. I was thinking of it as an offset to the property tax, but clearly from what Dick was saying, and from what we've heard about the capital requirements, et cetera, that would be another way of approaching this and saying we need to beef up the budget in the long run, and here's how we can do it. So I think it should be made very clear which of those things we're really talking about in so far as possible. I think people may have really different reactions to it depending on that question of why are we doing it? What's the point? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Anybody else on the board? So the, oh, yeah, I'm
Just
sorry.
really quickly.
Yeah.
I promise.
No, it's okay.
I just wanted to reassure Franz that I think we're all collecting quite a bit of data, and I think we'll leave that as a teaser for next week. I certainly am collecting a lot of data that shows that this is going to be a really great thing, and just there were like 5 things I wanted to say that were related to what Dick said then, but the one I just wanted to echo is the burden on our property taxpayers. Because we had in our town manager's report that the burden this year is going from 84% to 86%. So on the town side, at least. That means that 86% in the proposed budget, anyway, of the burden is on our property taxpayers. And that, I see, is a real danger to damage the livability of this town. A lot of the infrastructure and a lot of everything surrounding us is dependent on people looking at Brattleboro as a wonderful place to visit and a wonderful place to work, perhaps, but I'm going to live in Hinsdale, I'm going to live in Dummerston, I'm going to live somewhere else, just close enough, you know. I want those people to consider Brattleboro because our tax rates are competitive with those surrounding towns. We have a long way to go to get there because our taxes are generally higher. But our wonderful things that we can offer to residents, and I live downtown, so I can tell you that it's wonderful to live downtown for a lot of the reasons that Dick articulated. But we really need to pull the trigger, I think, on this second method that the state allows towns to have as a revenue source. I think it's very important, and the timing is very good right now, and I look forward to providing some data as to why I believe that next week.
Brandy.
I'd like to join Tim in voicing concern about the burden on property tax payers, and I'd like to remind us that when gas prices went up from 99 cents, we never saw them really come, they haven't come back down. They're not coming back down. And taxes might adjust here or there, but they're not going to come flying back down. And the place they really don't come flying back down out of is rent. When your landlord builds in an adjustment for your property taxes, even if taxes in the town come sliding back down slightly, chances are your rent is not going to. And so the impact that this has on people who are low income, middle income, and lower than low income is really significant. And I would also say that I agree with basically everything that Dick said, and I would also add that while Brattleboro, I agree, would become a town of haves, but I also would say, rather than saying that people in low income would leave, chances are they would stay because they couldn't leave and they would end up on my doorstep at work. More and more I see there's struggles getting vouchers for housing. Housing prices are very expensive. Even if you get a voucher, it's not often covering the whole thing. So seeing rents go up will make it so that a disparity will be even more visible between the haves and the have-nots, between people flying signs or maybe not flying signs, but closing the door and suffering without heat or without groceries, and the people opening the door to Peter Havens. That disparity could become even more visible if we do not open our eyes to other revenue sources. And to me, this is a no-brainer. This is an opportunity to not raise fees on business owners, to not continuously and unsustainably jack up property taxes, but to find a way to add a little bit more revenue and kind of make it so we can all breathe a bit easier while we're looking at aging infrastructures and huge equipment replacements and capital plans that are really hard to swallow when we look at our revenue stream.
Anybody else?
Just, Tim, I think you might find quite a bit of useful material in the documentation from the previous votes. I think the last time, was it 15 we did it? I think it was. 14 or 15, we voted it again. And there was a study from UVM that, about river towns and the effect of the sales. There was already a bunch of work has been done already. So you might be able, somebody will be able to dig it out of the historical record.
Sure. Great. All right, so the plan right now is at the next meeting, November 27th, we will have an in-depth discussion about this. Is that okay? Sounds like a plan?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next up is we're renaming a private drive, which is a road off of Bonnyvale Road.
Yep.
We're not renaming, we're naming it.
Naming it, right. So this is in the continuing process of updating certain spots in town to comply with the E911 system statewide. There is a driveway that's currently serving multiple properties off of Bonnyvale Road that needs to have a name, and the residents of that street, as well as our public safety personnel, have agreed that an appropriate name for it and a unique name, which is important so that it's not confused with other places in town, would be Barred Owl Lane. And so we're proposing for your approval tonight that you declare this street, private drive that's off of Bonnyvale Road to be Barred Owl Lane.
Does anyone on the board or in the public have any questions about this?
Is the asterisk where you can find the owl?
I can't answer that, sorry.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the name of Barred Owl Lane for a private drive off Bonnyvale Road as presented.
We have a motion to approve the name of Barred Owl Lane. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Next up is review of our goals, and I'm going to turn it over to David because you had a suggestion.
Well, I did. I think I'm about to change my suggestion because what Tim said about about the conference, because what I generated was a list of questions that I have that reflect things that I've been hearing from people, and a list of organizations that I either have heard from directly or indirectly have expressed concerns about housing. And I think when you were talking about, or whoever was talking about people coming here to live, the reality of there not being many places to live here, never mind the cost of them, doesn't enter into it. So, but there anyway. I don't know what needs to be done. I have a sense of how to do community outreach and community programs that in ways to engage the community and generate questions that get you to some action steps if that's what you want. But I really have no expertise or understanding of or claim any understanding except what people have told me, that we need housing for this or that or the other thing. And that it's holding back our economic growth, it's holding back our job growth, it's making it hard for seniors to stay in their homes. And there's all kinds of, issues and problems. It's hard for our kids to stay here because they can't afford to live anywhere in town. And so I just want to explore it, see if we can find out, as the sort of leadership for the town, see if we can find out what really is the need, what really is going on, similar to the way you want to undertake the local option sales tax. And just see what needs to be done and if we have any role to play in that, or at least to direct people to whatever resources there are, private or not public, but whatever the other options are. But people who might want to contribute to solving the problem. So the questions I came up with were, how can we find out what needs exist for housing in the Brattleboro community? Who could help us gather this information, and what process should we follow to ensure we get broad community engagement? And I don't know if those have any relationship whatsoever to what you found at that conference, what you and Sue found at that conference or not. But since you're having dinner, maybe Sue.
That sounds good.
Really in a moment. It's very crafty.
Yes.
Can you repeat that last statement, please? We couldn't hear
I
you.
wonder what I said.
Something about Sue Philly.
Oh, maybe since Tim is eating, Sue might be able to tell us about the conference.
Well, I'm happy to tell you about.
Nice try.
You can come sit up here and team up.
Put me on the spot.
So,
Perfectly timed.
so it's a biennial conference that the Vermont Housing Finance Agency puts on. And it's typically right after the gubernatorial election. So there was a great keynote speaker. She was an urban designer, planner, is often involved with housing redevelopment projects. She's from the Bay Area, so where there's probably the most severe shortage of affordable housing, or one of the in the country. And she really spoke about getting the stories of the people that live there, so that you, when you're doing redevelopment, that you're meeting the needs of the people the best that you can. There was another really dynamic woman out of Boston who spoke about getting the messaging right, and really building the case for community. That housing, we see it as kind of a commodity instead of a basic right. So she spoke, often they're talking about economy and jobs, but you can't have that if you don't have your basic need met. So she spoke a lot about kind of changing that message and trying to build agreement and trying to point that out to the community. And then there were individual sessions at the conference that you could attend. I went to one on what can municipalities do. It was a lot in the regulation, the zoning realm. And so I think I came away with that it's worth having the Planning Commission go through our regulations, even though they're updated. There's probably still some areas that can be tweaked. And then there was another session that Tim and I both attended on what's called a NOAA, a naturally occurring affordable housing, and how you can preserve that. Because in Burlington and other parts of the country, there's a lot of developers coming in and buying up the properties and then raising the rents, redeveloping them, raising the rents. So how do we preserve these NOAAs, as they're called? That was a pretty, as I think Tim said, it was kind of wonky. It was really maybe at the housing trust level or above, how they go about putting financing together. But it was definitely an interesting conversation, because there are lots of properties in town that aren't owned by the housing trust that are affordable, but how do we go about preserving those?
And I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll tack on a little bit, just maybe moving backwards on the NOAA discussion, which is, again, naturally occurring affordable housing. Part of the idea of gentrification is what happens is large companies can come in and buy up housing blocks that are right now affordable, and then make them unaffordable, just raise the rents precipitously. And
We all know why.
yeah,
Just
I
throwing
mean,
that out there.
and there's, it's about money. Do you want to chime in?
I think it's also about classism and trying to make sure that certain people are less visible in our sweet little towns.
Sure. And about money, but I
And
agree.
about money.
I agree.
Those are almost the same thing.
And the name of the person that you were mentioning earlier was Tiffany Manuel?
Yes, the woman
Manuel?
from Boston, yeah.
Yeah, and her quote that I wrote down was, people think of housing as a consumer good rather than something that we owe each other, which I think is really good. She also amusingly blamed it on HGTV and outsiders. So, because of that idea that housing is something that we're all buying instead of something we have a right to. Mitzi Johnson had a few nice quotes too. She said, "We're okay in Vermont helping people to live in poverty with lots of programs and helping hands, and then we trap them there." So that transition from poverty to middle class, for lack of a better term, is what's very difficult for a lot of people, and that's part of the reason I'm sort of. At the conference, I was trying to concentrate on that middle ground, because that middle ground is super important in a town like Brattleboro, I think, because we need that strong middle ground for a place for people who are lower than that to go. And throughout lives, young people should, I mean, when I was young, I lived in kind of not so nice places, and now I'm older, and I have a little bit more money, and I can live in a better place. And I think everybody has a right to have that opportunity. So I try to concentrate on the middle ground. I'm sure Brandy is very familiar with the lower end of things and trying to just get a leg up and into homes in the first place. What else? That's about it. I mean, I went to an interesting talk by Bob Stevens, who talked about the history of the Brooks House and how that was improved and what methods were used to do that. He actually had a good quote. I want to share that with you. Actually, I don't have it written down. That our downtown buildings are the best investment in communities for a number of reasons. Rather than thinking about investing in outlying areas, to really concentrate on existing structures and make them better and livable for people.
One of the
that
things,
out there.
yeah, one of the you mentioned from going from poverty to something. One of the ways we learned to formulate that in school was moving from poverty to independence, like helping families get settled and get those services around them so that they can then move on and become independent and not have to rely on those services anymore. Were there any workshops on how to do it, or success stories where communities were able to create more? I think whatever we find out, it's going to indicate that we need more affordable housing. I mean, right now you have to make over $45,000 a year to be able to afford to live in Brattleboro, and starting teachers only make $40,000, so it's pretty restrictive. And so I don't even. Anyway, I think that's what we're going to find, is that's where the need is.
So the two examples that I was given where they've been able to create some additional affordable housing were kind of initiatives of the Champlain Housing Trust. But South Burlington, they're trying to create a new town center, and so they had a affordable housing committee that was appointed with the charge of doing a needs analysis and then putting together an action plan. And they basically, some of the tools they used was getting a TIF district so that they could attract Champlain Housing Trust and also Cathedral Square to come in and do some of the housing. And I think they've had one project that's successfully been done. I think it's senior housing in their new downtown area. They also have set up a housing trust fund. And then the other example was in Barrie, and that was kind of with a lot of the foreclosures, there was some sort of program that they took advantage of back in 2008, 2009, where they could buy up foreclosed properties. So the housing trust there, I think it was a housing trust. It's Down Street, and the city of Barrie partnered. And they bought up a bunch of blighted foreclosed properties and were able to get them redeveloped with affordable housing.
Was the South Burlington Housing Trust a private philanthropic, or was it municipal?
The Champlain Housing Trust.
Whatever happened when they set up, whatever they did in South Burlington.
The housing trust fund that they set up was a municipal
Municipal.
fund. Yeah. and it was established with $50,000. And I wanted to go back and research exactly what they used that trust fund for. He didn't really speak to it. But a housing needs assessment is a common way that communities will look at what are the housing needs. When we did the town plan, we took a look at the housing needs assessments that were done on behalf of Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust. So they do them periodically. One was done when the co-op housing was being developed, so we had looked at that one, and I think there was an update that looked at a couple of Wyndham County communities. So that's what we had used. We've never done one for Brattleboro. They usually have hired a consultant out of UMass to do those housing needs
And so they did it for the Wyndham Windsor region.
They did it for 3 communities: Wilmington, or maybe 3 downtowns: Wilmington, Bellows Falls, and Brattleboro. But at this point, it's probably at least 6 years old. I'm not sure if Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust has done an updated one.
So what would we like to do?
Yeah, that's gonna.
Yeah, it might not be. I think I don't want this subject to die. So I'd
No,
like it to keep
definitely
coming
not.
back
I'd like to
us.
keep it recurring on the agenda. Well, I'm happy to go to see if I can get the 6-year-old Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust.
I can send you a copy of it.
Oh, that'd be great.
We have one in the office.
That would be great. And just look it over and see what it says. Well, I guess we could talk about whether the best way to do the needs assessment. I had thought about inviting people in and getting a broad community response, but if there are actually professionals that do that, then some blend of those two things might make more sense. But I think finding out, what the need, there's so many different concepts or beliefs about what the need is, and getting some clarity on that, I think, kind of has to be the place to start.
One thing I'd say about the housing needs assessment, it's pretty much a data analysis. I think what I came away from that conference with, it's really important to hear the stories of people too.
Right.
So,
Right.
So maybe it's some sort of combination.
Great.
It feels to me like a community conversation too. Similar to what happened. A lot of people came before us with the panhandling issue, and we discovered that it's much bigger than us. It's national. The many things that feed into poverty, homelessness, drug addiction. So it feels to me that being present at the table in a community conversation is important for the select board. Having a forum or forums at the library, for instance. Even having getting groups together and having Tiffany, Dr. Manuel, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I think she's localish, right? She's up in...
I thought she was Boston.
Oh, okay. Well, that's localish.
It is local.
Better than San Francisco.
She was amazing.
Yeah, she was really, really good. So that's that people element that you were talking about, sort of hearing the stories. That would be...
But she was the one that did the presentation about, or that talked about get the stories of the people in order to meet the need.
They both kind of did. The other woman was Liz Ogbu, but she's from San Francisco.
And
But the concept's pretty.
Yes.
Yeah.
if I can put out there, I'm looking at your list, and not everybody, but there are people on this list that are already meeting at Housing Things regularly. There's a program in Vermont that I am not exactly qualified enough to speak to called Coordinated Entry, and that's going to involve people who are working with trying to house people, and they might be not only discussing this already, have a roster of these committees that are already meeting, but if they're like, yes, Brandy's right, we kind of do that, but this group does that more comprehensively. So reaching out to people like Rihanna or somebody at the Housing Trust, and you could specifically say, Brandy mentioned something about a coordinated entry meeting, and just see if that somehow jogs just so we're not reinventing creating committees, because I do think that the municipality
Absolutely.
should be a part of these discussions, and if they're already going on, it'd be super just to like jump into them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And probably throw in Housing Vermont as one of the great groups to, if you're going to have a list of possible people to speak with.
Well, what I'll do is try to reach out to these and to those two suggestions and look at what the Housing Trust had and see if I see what is in place and then and bring that back. I'm happy to keep doing this, and I definitely don't want to put it on the staff's plate. If we may have no role to play here whatsoever, but it just just keep hearing it.
I think it should come back. I think there probably is a role, so
I think probably.
we're gonna just go out on a limb.
Thank you for that.
Thanks. Surprise.
I think we're done.
Good job, Sue.
Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thanks, everybody.
She's good.
I like her a lot.
Yeah, she's
See everybody next week.
enjoyable to
The only concrete thing we did was name a street.
whatever.
Bard Owl.